everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight for the week of March 26, 2025. Huge episode. First of all, 16 books to talk about. I've been super busy with the day job. Apologies that the Indie Spotlight for last week didn't go out. It's still gonna come out. You're gonna get the Indie Spotlight for last week tomorrow or today if you're listening on Wednesday. And then the spotlight for this week's indies will go out late Wednesday or early Thursday. Even though I was super busy, I had that work convention thing. Luckily, it was in town. It made it a little easier. I was still able to join Rocky for the DC spotlight, but I was there all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I had a wedding that I had to go to. Who gets married on a Thursday? Yeah, I know. And it was like, even though they live in Phoenix, quote unquote Phoenix, like us, it was still over an hour and a half from my house that I had to drive out. They got literally married out in the middle of the desert, just out in the middle of the desert. Like there's some balloons tied to the side of the road to a little post, and I literally had to drive my car. I don't have a truck, a 4x4 in my EV. I wasn't super happy about that, but like literally in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, and then Friday, my daughter had a dance competition that was on call all weekend. So yeah, nice. It's been crazy busy. On top of which I showed Rocky some pictures before, some video. He was looking at it. I've been, longtime listeners of the podcast will know that 2023, I started reorganizing my books so they'll be chronological instead of alphabetical. So I can just add to the end, because what happens is I buy a big chunk of a run of something, or I'm sticking stuff in alphabetical, and you're always having to shift books. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go year and month, and I'm just always adding to the end. I did like a third of it and never touched it in over a year, like 2023. And so finding things has been extremely hard, and I couldn't put anything new that I bought away because it was a mess. So I started working on it in earnest again. That's taken up a ton of time as well. WonderCon's coming up at the end of the week. If you're going to be there, be sure you're following me on social media. If you want to meet up and get a Comic Source lanyard or hang out, grab a drink, whatever, take a picture. Always love to meet listeners and people that watch us on YouTube. So yeah, also big news, Diamond was bought in bankruptcy court. Alliance Games is now known as Alliance Entertainment. They're going to be distributing. Supposedly, I've talked to some people that are kind of in the know in the industry, some publishers and what have you. They're very excited for the plans that Alliance has. Alliance Games, so they've been distributing games like Magic the Gathering, that sort of stuff, Dungeons and Dragons. So what experience they have distributing comics? Well, I don't think they have much, but it's not that different than distributing games. And they supposedly, these people that I talked to said, hey, I've talked to people over there. They have a plan. Well, the fact they have a plan, they're already ahead of Diamond, because Diamond never seemed to have a plan. Didn't know what the hell they were doing. So, and I've heard really good things. This might be good news for you, Rocky, that Alliance's distribution network in Canada is very robust.
Oh, I would love that.
Maybe a lot.
I would love that.
Yeah, a lot easier to get the books in Canada, maybe cheaper. So yeah, good news all around on a lot of fronts, but interesting times, because this is going to shake out over the next few months. Plus, DC's been announcing tons of other stuff about upcoming events. There's an absolute event coming up toward the end of the summer. There's an event about to kick off that one of the books today we're going to talk about leads into. We have the Superman movie coming up, obviously. So yeah, tons of stuff going on. So thanks for joining us as always, everybody. Don't forget, if you're listening audio only, you can find us on any podcast network or platform. Just do a search for Comic Source and subscribe. But if you are listening audio only, if that's how you found us, be sure you head over to Rocky's channel every week, Comic Space Boom ! That's where this comes out. You can see the artwork, you can see our smiling faces, and you can check it out. The Indie Spotlight I talked about earlier comes out on the Comic Source YouTube channel. So again, head over to the Comic Source YouTube channel to check out the indie books that come out for the week. And regardless of which channel, like, comment, subscribe, leave comments below. We love to get conversations going in the comment section. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you know when these new episodes drop, plus all the other content, all the interviews I do on the Comic Source channel. If you've rung that notification bell, you're going to know when those interviews come out. And I got a lot of interviews on top of everything else that's going on. I got a lot of interviews this week, I think like 4 or 5. So a lot going on. That being said, really strong week with DC books. There's a lot of them. Some really strong debuts, some returning series that are fantastic, and it's a Wonder Woman week. And when it's a Wonder Woman week, there's always the possibility of a rant. and always a possibility of strong disagreement
Yes.
between Rocky and I, as I am a big fan of Tom King and the Wonder Woman series, and Rocky, despite him professing to love Wonder Woman as one of his favorite characters, never seems to like the Wonder Woman stories. I don't get it.
Well, I
One of these
love
days.
Absolute Wonder Woman this week. It's really genuinely fantastic. I have a renewed sense of love for Kelly Thompson and a renewed appreciation for a number of reasons that we'll get into. And the Tom King story may have some potential, as we'll discuss as we get to it. So hope springs eternal, and I'm wearing my Wonder Woman cap, my friend. And I
There you
always
go.
have you to set me straight. So that's good.
These are. I'm not saying I'm right. You're wrong. And I totally get where you're coming from, and we'll get there. But you're gonna have to hang in there, everybody, because it's the last book on the list, Wonder Woman 19.
Hang in there.
But yeah, but I we talked a little bit before the show. I could totally get where you're coming from. But yeah, we'll get there. But anyway, the first book that we're going to talk about on the list here is Batman: The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween. We're up to issue number 6. This is from writer Jeph Loeb. Enrico Marini is the artist. Dave Stewart on colors. Richard Starkey is lettering and design. If you're not familiar with Enrico Marini, he is an Italian artist, known very well known in Europe for his work on various books over there. And he was a big Tim Sale fan, even though he never had a chance to meet him. And his artwork, I think, is just spectacular. This was I should, before I go any farther, I should say this did not make my top 10. Just missed it. I ranked it at number 6. But the strength of the art was the reason it even ranked that high. This is far and away, based on the art, my favorite issue of the series so far. I just thought the art was so beautiful that it was engaging. That's the word that really comes to mind. It was such an engaging story, and it pulled me in a way that the story hadn't pulled me in before. That being said, I still feel like this, for whatever reason, version of or latest entry into The Last Halloween is a little bit more of what's the word I'm searching for? More of a modern sort of take on this story, which is interesting because I don't think
And it
that's
has your
Jeph
favorite
Loeb's.
character in it. It has your favorite character in it, dude.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say, I mean, Rocky's got her there on the screen. Amanda Waller shows up, and I don't know why, because it. Yeah, I mean, again, this is not on either our top 5. I don't want to waste too much time talking about it, but yeah, the fact that she shows up, I guess, so that we have this version, the Long Halloween version of Amanda, but she shows up basically to go neener to Gordon and Batman. Hey, you got a big mess on your hands because you didn't bother to tell me what's going on, and I'm not going to help you with it at all. So f off, and she walks away. It's like, why did you even bother to show up? So even I don't know, maybe it's a DC editorial mandate. Whenever Amanda Waller shows up, she's got to be just a complete POS.
Yeah.
Just a total piece of human excrement, as I like to describe her. So yeah, I don't know why they wasted the time with her here. I guess maybe she shows back up in the story later, because again,
Yeah.
she just shows up and goes, "Oh yeah, you got a mess. You should have told me, but you didn't. So bye." Yeah, whatever. But anyway, like I said, the art really pulled me in. I'm a little bit more interested in this story because it feels like it's been dragging a little bit to me. So I don't know. Anything to add, Rocky?
Well, I agree. I think the art's fantastic. I like I like the relationship between Batman and Robin. I like the character work for Jim Gordon. The fact that his son's been kidnapped, his wife has left him as a result. There's a lot of character work by Jeph Loeb. To be honest with you, this is already, I find it more entertaining than the original Long Halloween. Quite frankly, I think it's better written. I really enjoy it, and I love the character work here with Catwoman. And the fact that Mario Falcone, Catwoman, is working with Poison Ivy. They've got Mario Falcone is actually, he's still alive, and they got him hidden out. And looks like Mario Falcone's mother is still alive, Louisa Falcone. And so there's more going on here because this does sort of chronicle the end of the mafia rule in Gotham before the age of the rogues, before the Batman's villains. And so there's still a lot of moving parts. It's very, the pieces really seem to be moving into place, and that pattern that is being put into place of focusing on a different villain each issue really seems to be working well, even though at first you think that would be hard to pull off, but Jeph Loeb finds a way to make it work. And you nailed it when you said that the art by Enrico Marini is really great, and Dave Stewart's colors do wonders as well. Good stuff.
Yeah, again, I just I take your point about it. The old story maybe dragging a little bit, and this one, like I said, it goes back to the feeling of more modern. It's so hard for me to compare because I've known that story, and other than when I read it when it was coming out monthly when it first came out in like '95, every time I've gone back to read before, I've read it as one story where I didn't have to wait in between. So it's really hard for me to compare because I know that complete story, and so it's a little easier to judge the pacing. I mentioned this one feeling like it's dragged a little until this particular issue when it feels like the story really starts moving forward, but you can't really tell because we don't have the whole story yet. So it's I don't know that it's a totally fair comparison, but anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have the highly anticipated Absolute Martian Manhunter #1. This is from writer Denis Camp. We have some incredible artwork from Javier Rodriguez. Letters are by Hassan Otsman Elhau. Rodriguez handles his own color work as well. Hope you guys all had a chance. Javier, English is his second language, so doesn't necessarily do kind of in-person interviews, but I did get a chance to do a print interview. So hope you guys all had a chance to read that over at LRM Online, because really interesting things that he had to say, because the use of color, especially in this book, is extremely important, and it provides a different experience. And that's really the best way to describe this, how different it is. My notes say art is next level, and it feels like a different book. And what I mean by that is, to some extent, all of the Absolute titles so far are sort of recognizable. Different things have shifted. I was talking to Scott Snyder the other day, and I was like, when it comes to Absolute Batman, it's probably the book where the setting itself is most close to the main universe. And what I mean by that is Gotham, the politics of Gotham and the fact that things are chaotic and what have you. That all feels, it sort of feels like the regular Gotham. Now, all the inhabitants are very different. Bruce is very different. Obviously, the events that have played out with Martha Wayne still being alive and Jim Gordon being the mayor, instead of the police commissioner, and Bruce himself, and the fact that Bruce's inner circle is composed of Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin, and Edward Nygma, the Riddler, and Waylon Jones, Killer Croc, and obviously Selina Kyle, Catwoman, and we even meet a Matches Malone in this upcoming issue. So all of that is different, but as far as the setting, it's the same, as opposed to the Flash. Everything feels completely different. Wonder Woman, everything feels completely different, except maybe Wonder Woman herself. The whole argument of she's Mary Sue. Superman, different in a lot of ways. But when it comes to this, I mean, this is not. First of all, he's not from Mars, and he's not really a physical presence. This is really, really, really different. It's focusing on this FBI agent. The very first page, we see he was caught up in an explosion, a suicide bomber. And that trauma has somehow allowed a psychic entity or some kind of psychic being to enter his mind, and it's communicating with him, and it's feeding off, in a way, off the memories of others. There's what's called thought smoke, and that's where the colors come in to tell the story. People's memories, like, literally boil out of their ears or boil out of their nostrils, and this FBI agent, who's sort of, I guess, for a better lack of a better term, infected by this psychic being, is breathing in this memory smoke and what have you. And he's kind of hearing this voice or whatever. And in a way, he's reading the mind and reading the memories of these people, or the psychic entity within him is doing so. And he's gaining the knowledge, right? Because they're sort of sharing a mind. And the whole reason he's thinking of himself as a Martian is for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's a little bit of a different sort of character. He's kind of aloof and, keeps to himself. And so the other members of the Bureau look at him like he's a little odd and think of him as a Martian in a way, because he's so, different from them, kind of a tongue-in-cheek term. And so this being, the psychic being, again, he's ingesting that memory smoke, and he's getting the opinions of other FBI agents about how they feel about this guy, and them thinking of him as Martian, plus the FBI agent himself, John Jones. That name's going to be familiar because that's the secret identity or alter ego of Martian Manhunter. But this FBI agent, himself, he's got memories and knowledge that the being has access to as well. And so, he's thinking in his own mind, just from his own experiences and what have you, that something that's weird and out there, an alien, like it's from Mars, is a Martian. And so, in a way, the psychic being is drawing on those two um, kind of thoughts, both external and internal, to sort of brand himself as a Martian in a way. But it's so different and so out there. And the other thing that struck me, and I talked a little bit about this with Javier, was kind of the almost this Art Deco or mod style of art, where it's really clean lines, really simple art that evokes almost this mod era, like the late 1960s kind of style of art, pop art a little bit, especially with the bright colors. And then you think, immediately in my mind, I'm thinking to things like I Spy or Mission Impossible, or came a little later, but Get Smart, which is more of a comedy kind of thing. But it's that, those sort of shows, and maybe a little bit of James Bond, although that was a little more suave and sophisticated or what have you. But you meld all that together and you have something that's really, really interesting. Plus, this is a book you're going to want to pick up physically as well, because they did something really interesting when they got to the last page, where purposely you've got on one page basically a picture of John Jones' head, face, whatever, and on the back of that page you have the Martian, right? And when you hold that page up to a light source, and it's comic book paper, so it's kind of see-through if you hold it up to a strong enough light source. You kind of get the overlap where it's kind of like a double exposed piece of film, where you're getting the Martian and John Jones, their heads basically kind of overlapping, and you get kind of their features melded against each other. So,
It's called
I mean,
Martian vision. They call it Martian vision.
yeah, Martian vision. And yeah, and it is interesting when you get to that final page as well. The other thing that I'll point out is the Martian Manhunter doesn't think of himself as the Martian Manhunter necessarily. It's got some like little dots right there, and it's kind of mirror image if you look at it in print, but when you hold it up to light, you'll see it. Because we're the Martian mind, and it's got dot 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 dot, and you could fill that in with HUNTER. But usually when you see dots like that, it's usually to blot out profanity. So I couldn't help but think of the other thing that the F word that you could put in there as well. Because this guy's really effing with John Jones's mind. Like, he's like, am I going crazy? What's going on? Whatever. So, like, if I had to sum it up in one word, and it's the word I've used a lot in talking about this book already with, other people that have had a chance to read it, is just different. It's just a really different experience. And in a good way, in a good way. So, and apologies to anybody out there who's a huge Martian Manhunter fan, like the classic John Jones Martian Manhunter. You're not really getting an absolute this is so completely different, and there hasn't been a Martian Manhunter series in a long time. And of all the originals, 7 founding members of the Justice League, he's the one that gets the kind of the least well known, and sort of gets the least exposure, and definitely has the least merchandise. You couldn't go out and buy Martian Manhunter like pajamas like you can Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Flash, any of those. You'd be able to find that stuff. Martian Manhunter, no. So, apologies to anybody that's was looking for a main universe version of Martian Manhunter, slightly tweaked to make an absolute version, because this is not that. This is completely different and out there, and just technically a very interesting comic, very well put together. The artwork from Javier Rodriguez, especially the colors, are out of this world. Yeah, there's nothing not to like about this book. It is awesome. It's really great. So, what were your thoughts on it, Rocky?
First of all, I would describe this. This is a Vertigo comic. This feels like a Vertigo comic.
Yeah.
You mentioned about how all the Absolute comics feel. They feel slightly different from each other. Absolute Flash might feel a little bit more, in my view, like a traditional comic. Absolute Batman is a little bit more hardcore, more Frank Miller-esque. You got Absolute Superman has got its vibe. Absolute Wonder Woman's got more of a mythological, sort of epic, uh, magical tale to it, a vibe to it. And this is straight up. I get Vertigo vibes from this. I love the use of colors here. The idea of Martian Manhunter, we know that he's a telepath in the mainstream universe. Here, this is a cop, John Jones, who basically, after an explosion, and of course the explosion is caused by a human flame character, classic villain. mainstream villain to the Martian Manhunter. The explosion gives us John Jones these sort of psychic abilities, but through this psychic entity is occupying his head. I love the use of the colors, the idea that he seems to inhale he inhales the thoughts. So this John seems to be able to read the thoughts of people, but he does through almost interestingly enough by inhaling the thoughts. The use of the dialogue about, the one lady was oozing out of her ears her thoughts through different colors, and he was picking up on them. And at times in the comic, he'd get overwhelmed with the thoughts when he's walking, when he's in a room. He could get overwhelmed with all these colors, and he would cough these colors out. And so it's a very good visual representation of being overwhelmed by thoughts. Imagine walking down a street or asking somebody questions, and you're overwhelmed by their memories because you don't know how to control it, you don't know how to process it yet, and so you're overwhelmed, bombarded with colors, and you're literally puking out and coughing out colors. It's very, very interesting what Dennis Camp had Javier Rodriguez do on the art here. It's really great. I don't know how their collaboration worked exactly, but it really is. It's very, very interesting in that respect to see where it's going to move forward and how John Jones here is going to, as he further investigates this explosion that he's not supposed to investigate, but as it's going to be interesting how this detective, how he's going to work as a detective when this psychic being, when he melds more comfortably with it. Now, a couple. I think this is really intriguing. It's very different. I can't help. It's so premature to judge. I kind of love this for a Vertigo, but then is it going to fit well into the idea of a superhero universe? The way this is written, it feels like a Vertigo title, and sometimes Vertigo, a more adult, a real visceral take, sometimes maybe it won't necessarily mesh well. It's going to be interesting when we get this absolute Justice League together, whether it's a year or 2 years down the road. It's going to be really different to see how these eclectic group of absolute heroes meld together as a team, because they're so different. And that's so, in a way, it makes me wonder and go, but at the same time, it's like, this is really kind of cool. And as a DC fan, I like the fact, even though I might rant about it from time to time, I like the fact that this is different. It feels different. It looks different. And I like being, I'd rather have this than getting exactly what I want. This is my expectations being subverted in all the right ways. And I really enjoyed this. And this was in my top 5. And I believe it was in your top 5 as well.
Yeah, it's in my top 3, actually.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah. Next one is in both our top 5. Next one is in my top 3 as well. And I take your point about, when it comes together, is this going to be the outlier? I don't know that that's necessarily. I mean, it might be an outlier, but I don't think it'll be the only outlier, because when you get a chance to read Absolute Green Lantern, the word that I would use to describe that would be horror, in a way. Like the first issue, it felt like a horror comic. And so it's not necessarily going to fit, and Al Ewing, Immortal Hulk, that's very much a horror comic as well, as opposed to the first 4, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, that even though it's absolute and they're different takes, they feel like superhero books. I think that's okay. And I'll talk about it a little bit later when we talk about some of the other books too, about kind of the diversity of the DC line. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Next book that we have to talk about is Absolute Wonder Woman. And why do I not have it open?
You mean, I thought it was Batman Hush. It's Absolute Wonder Woman?
Is it Batman Hush? Hold on. Oh, you're right. It is Batman Hush. Sorry. My fault, everybody. Yeah. So this was in your top 5, Rocky. So obviously written by Jeph Loeb, much like, the first Hush, and this highly anticipated. And I don't want to go like on a huge rant or whatever, but it does bother me a little bit. Not that they didn't give Chip Zdarsky time to finish up his run or whatever, but DC was adamant about wanting this in the regular title. It couldn't be on its own. It couldn't stand alone. It had to be like the first Hush and be in the regular Batman title. But then, because Jim Lee's not as fast as he used to be, and he's not hungry like he used to be, because the guy's got so much money now, it's ridiculous. But it's like they gave him some time, and they finished, or they will have finished the first 6 issues to put them out on a monthly schedule, but not the last 6. So even though they wanted this in the main Batman title so badly that they said, okay, Chip, we're taking you off the title. How much time you need to finish up or whatever. And because they had to have this in the regular title, like I said, so we're going to get the first 6 issues in this regular Batman title, and then the Matt Fraction run of Batman's going to start after these 6 issues are going to conclude this volume of Batman. Batman's going to restart again with a new number 1 with Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez. And then the last 6 issues of Hush 2 are going to be in a standalone 6-issue mini.
Oh my God, that's stupid.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Right? Is that not the because again, you couldn't make Matt Fraction wait, right? Which I get, which I understand. So you should have just left it alone and let Jim Lee work on this when he had time to work on it, whatever, till you had like 10 issues done, let's say, then announce it and release 10 issues. And then as those 10 issues come out over a period of 10 months, it gives Jim Lee 10 months to finish the last 2 issues. And you leave Chip to do what Chip's going to do on his Batman run. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like I'm saying Chip Zdarsky's Batman run was the greatest thing ever. Again, the jumping from the moon and plenty of other issues I had with it. But it was doing well enough, and I feel like Chip was finding his footing, and it was getting better. And then it just doesn't sit well with me. You say we had to have it in the regular title. We had to have it in the regular title. Then you do 6 issues in the regular title, but now the other 6 issues are a standalone on its own. It just, I mean, is anybody surprised by these dumbass corporate decisions? It's ridiculous. So anyway, it is written by Jeph Loeb. Jim Lee handles pencils, Scott Williams on inks, Alex Clare on colors. I mean, this is literally getting the band back together. Richard Starkings on letters. And I don't have a whole heck of a lot to say about this. This, for me, what did I put for my notes? Underwhelming. I just put one word, underwhelmed. I was underwhelmed by this. And I get it. I think that my appreciation for it is, unfortunately, it's hard for me to be objective. I'm colored. I'm being influenced, I guess is the right word, by those dumbass editorial decisions I was just talking about. But yeah, this didn't blow me away. I know a lot of people are excited for it and whatever. And Hush was certainly something that was unexpected at the time when it came out. But now you're kind of going back and people go in with expectations. And I did too, probably. But this is not the same Jim Lee. Don't get me wrong; he's one of the most influential comic artists of all time. He's a super super nice guy. I always love talking to Jim and hanging out, whatever. But it's not, he's not at his peak anymore. And this, I just didn't feel like it was anything special. And we're sort of going over the same story beats, even to the point where in the story themselves, Batman is commenting on, well, this feels familiar. We've gone over this, ground before. What's happening? And the other part of it is a little bit of the context I got from Jeph Loeb's story, which this makes sense as well when you stop to think about it. It almost felt like the way Batman was reacting to finding out Hush is back was that all the appearances of Hush that have happened in between the first Batman Hush story that happened in Batman in, God, I think, was it 2004 or whatever, 2003, long time ago, anyway, over 20 years ago. Like all the subsequent appearances of Hush and stories, whatever, it haven't happened. It almost feels like I just got that vibe, right? Even though he shows up, has shown up in Batman Eternal and All-Star Batman and like all these stories he's shown up in over the years, it felt like none of that happened. And this is just, he's coming back. Like this is the next story. And again, Jeph Loeb, it's not like he's been writing or been involved in the main universe over at DC in any way, shape, or form since he did, Hush. He's done a story here or there. And certainly some stories in kind of the Long Halloween universe, if you will. But, none of that has anything to do with like the regular continuity. And so, again, that's why I question this idea of why did you want this in the main line? Like, Rocky and I have praised DC so much recently, ever since Absolute Power, ever since Mark Waid sort of, has been really influential and been sort of helping show run things over there. The continuity's been much improved and much tighter, and then you do this, and I know why you do it if you're DC, right? If you're DC Warners, or Discovery Warner Brothers, because you know the sales numbers on Hush back in the day. You know this is going to get mainstream media attention. You know it's going to sell well, and that's all they care about. They don't care about the continuity or whatever. But again, in my mind, it's like, yeah, you set this out of continuity. You don't put it in the regular title. And then you can set it in whatever time frame you want to say, hey, this takes place a week after the end of the original 12-issue Hush series. You can. But the fact that you had to have it in the regular title, it doesn't make any sense logically. And again, it just, I don't know. It felt like it was missing something to me. I was very, very underwhelmed by this. Even though, all these guys are super, super talented. Don't get me wrong. But the sum here is not greater than the parts in my mind. And again, it's just the first issue. Maybe it gets better. I don't know if everybody's aware, but they are releasing this in 11 by 17. Every issue of the 6-issue Hush issues are going to be released in an 11.5 by 17, which is, the size of the actual art boards that Jim Lee draws on. Again, might be a bit of a cash grab or whatever, but if you want to see the Jim Lee art in, a bigger scale, they're all going to be released in that giant size. So yeah, obviously more expensive. I think they're $8.99 or $9.99 as opposed to the regular $4.99. But yeah, this did not make my top 5, and it almost didn't make my top 10. Where did I have it ranked? I had it ranked at. Actually, no, it didn't. It had it ranked at 14, 14 out of 16. So it did not make my top 10.
I could have put Green Lantern number 21 in at number 5. This was either going to be 6 or 5 for me. And to be honest with you, every constructive criticism you just said of it is exactly why it sort of made my top 5, because it's what DC needs. It needs the story is ridiculously simplistic. It's a cop out of a story. Now, why did I like it so much? It's great art. It's very straightforward. You're going to be able to read. You're going to easily be able to go from reading Hush to Hush 2. Hush is an evergreen title. It continues to make money as a trade for DC Comics, and this is clearly written for a trade, and I think this will sell well when it's a trade, and I think that's exactly what it is. But, the art is good, and, look, I can go on a rant about Jim Lee and about being overrated, blah, blah, blah. The guy sells, and at the end of the day, people buy his comics, and we want more people in comics. We want more people to buy DC and even Marvel, because there's always that cause and effect. And this is a fun. It's a straightforward story. Tommy Elliott is back. Tommy Elliott is back, and thank God I can forget every other Hush. Tommy Elliott, who is Hush. Tommy Elliott was a schoolhood friend of Bruce Wayne. He's a doctor. He knows all of Bruce Wayne's secrets. That was revealed, of course, in the original Hush series. And all the appearances, but over the last 20 years of Tommy Elliott in DC Comics, he became kind of a joke character in many ways through multiple appearances. You can kind of forget them, and I prefer to forget them. This elevates him a little bit. Hush is back. He's more kick-ass. He takes out the Joker here. He even throws his scalpels, and he internally cuts the Joker. The Joker is kind of Hush's bitch in this opening issue. And it's all basically set up, and because it's all set up. So now, what's the agenda that Hush has? We don't know what it is yet. Again, this is all set up. Talia al Ghul makes an appearance, saves Batman from drowning, and then the Joker gets beaten up by Hush, and we know that the Oracle and Nightwing. Barbara Gordon shows up with Nightwing. She's back in the Clock Tower. The Clock Tower is back. Their system is completely compromised, so Hush is hacked into the Bat computers and the Bat network, the Heroes network, so to speak. And so it's all well and good, and it's cool. It's good setup. It's a great opening issue for this. You don't need to be worried about continuity. You just want to enjoy Batman. If you're so many people out there who don't read a lot of Batman, they've read Hush. They're going to be able to read this and jump right in and enjoy it. And I don't. I think that Jim Lee still has it. He's not necessarily my artist of choice, but the visuals are still pretty spectacular. And Alex Sinclair in the colors. This is a classic creative team that's earned their stripes, and this was, I enjoyed it. It was not bad.
Yeah, I've come to appreciate Jim Lee's artwork a lot more over the years. I had like his earliest stuff, first Alpha Flight. I was collecting X-Men when he drew whatever. I actually became a bigger Jim Lee fan after I met him, and interviewed him a few times just because he's such a great guy. he never was on my list of favorite artists or whatever. But I get that he's got a style that's very pleasing and people enjoy it. And I take your point, right? Like this could bring people back, lapsed readers and what have you. And in those instances, it doesn't matter how well it fits in a continuity or what have you. But I have to judge it from the perspective that I'm coming at it from. And for me, yeah, it ranks 14th this week. It's not very, not very high on my list. Anyway, on to Absolute Wonder Woman, number 6 now. This does make both of our top 5. It is in my top 3. Another one that's in my top 3. Kelly Thompson is the writer. We have a different artist on it this week. Mattio de Iluis is the artist. Now, Matteo has worked with Kelly Thompson before. They did some work over at Marvel. And then most recently, they worked together on a miniseries at Image called The Cull, which is, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is absolutely a must read. It is so good. And Mattia's art is such an important part of the narrative of that story. It's about these teenagers who go to another dimension and what have you. And what Mattia does to bring emotion to that story, particularly with the detail, he has a very photorealistic style, but particularly the detail and the emotion he's able to convey in people's expressions and body language is amazing. And he brings that sensibility here, and he's handling the color work just like he did in The Cull as well. And then you have Becca Carey on letters, who's been fantastic throughout. I mean, particularly for Absolute Wonder Woman, we've had mythological beings and monsters, and we're traveling to the Wild Isle, and we're in hell and what have you. So different fonts and big giant word balloons and things blown up in different ways, and that continues here, where Wonder Woman goes and meets with Hades, and he's really interesting to look at the way he's depicted. And Hades' servants, these kind of shades that are they look very similar to him, just much smaller, more diminutive, and their word balloons have their own unique look and what have you as well. But again, the artwork, the sense of storytelling. There's a scene early on where Wonder Woman's bowing down in front of Hades because he is supposedly a god, and she's paying her respects, and she supposedly puts her weapons aside, and he's like, you don't fool me, everything you're wearing is a weapon, and he makes her take it all off, and the scene shifts here and there. Like, we're looking at her brow as she takes off her circlet, we're looking at her arms as she's taking off her bracers, we're looking at her wrists as she takes off and her armor and what have you. And it's that sense of storytelling that Mattia is bringing, along with what I was talking about before, with the emotions and the face and the body language and what have you, that really elevate this story. I mean, it's fantastic that if you're watching us on YouTube, Rocky's got the page up right here. Once she has all the armor, all her quote unquote weapons, laying there, and she's got this like, is this good enough for you? Kind of pose as she's standing, and it evokes this sense of who she is, her personality, and even Hades himself picks up on it, right? He mentions, oh, well, you got kind of a smart mouth, you got kind of a sharp tongue on you and what have you, and that's all being conveyed not through Kelly's script in terms of the dialogue or the scripting or what have you. We don't know how much she was describing, hey, Mattia, in this panel, do this or do that. I kind of tend to think she probably doesn't have to, being that she's worked with Mattia before, but he's smart enough to be able to, again, show the story, tell the story with body language and what have you. And it's the art is so fantastic. This feels like a different book. It feels like a different book from what we've had in Absolute Wonder Woman before. And yeah, by far my favorite issue of the series so far, as she goes to meet with Prometheus. She's recounting a story when she met with Prometheus to Hades, when Hades is asking her how she built, which lasso is the lasso of
Nemesis?
What do they call it? Yeah.
Nemesis lasso.
Nemesis lasso, yeah.
Yeah.
Which can, supposedly can transform things and what have you. And we find out how she got Pegasus, who's, kind of the remains of Pegasus, I guess you'd say, or the skeleton of Pegasus. And when he emerges from these kind of this molten pile of lava rocks and what have you, that's a fantastic scene as well. So I was just blown away. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Mattia. I think he's fantastic. Super nice guy to chat with too, if you ever see him at a con. But just fantastic. And we get Mattia's art on the next issue as well. This one ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger with the back and forth between Wonder Woman and Hades, when Hades kind of surprises her and says, well, maybe this will shut you up, so to speak. And we find out that he's got Circe tied up in these magical chains. Um, and once that's revealed to Wonder Woman, and she's kind of shocked by it, shocked into silence, and Hades says, "Oh, no more smart remarks now." Because her mother is trapped. So we'll see exactly why she's meeting with Hades, and what's going to come from that. But again, just spectacular art. Even that moment when Wonder Woman sees Circe, bound by these chains, and then we get a close up of her eyes. And her pupils are dilated down because she's so surprised by it. You can see the tears welling up in her eyes. I mean, just incredible emotion in the work by Mattia. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't not put this in my top three. And as soon as I heard that Mattia was drawing these issues, I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to see what he's going to do. Because again, bringing that mythological feel, which to me, I've talked about it before. The whole Wonder Woman is part of the gods, whatever. That's sort of the least interesting aspect to me, and I don't typically enjoy it. But it just goes to show you with what you can do when you have the right style of art to really engage the reader and pull me into this world, because it's just epic. It's so good. So yeah, I was blown away by this. What are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
This feels like a different series to me. I was absolutely blown away too. I have a renewed appreciation for the story, um, and it if I will say this, I have a renewed appreciation for the story now because of this art, straight up. And now I'll even say that I can appreciate what maybe Hayden Sherman, the series artist, was maybe going for. That never really worked for me. It hasn't really resonated for me from the beginning of this series. This felt epic. This is the first issue where it truly felt mythological to me. And the scene that embodies that was Wonder Woman holding the axe, staring at a giant Prometheus behind her, chained to the mountain, as a bird like is eating his. The bird eats his entrails, and she tells the bird to leave, and it's just. I mean, it's just. There's so. It's just an epic scene. I think the dialogue. This is the best issue for dialogue too. The dialogue that Kelly Thompson gives Wonder Woman, the way Wonder Woman makes cutting remarks to Hades very subtly. When Hades tells her, take her clothes off, basically remove the weapons from yourself, and then she's basically suggesting, you mean you want me to take off my clothes, essentially? I mean, and he says, yes, you're carrying weapons, and she teases him and says, well, I wonder if that's what the story will be in history, teasing him, like making sort of mocking him a little bit, taking pot shots at him, and being accused of Hades accusing Wonder Woman of having her mother's tongue, and it really drives it home, and we learn how much Zeus banished the Amazons. We learn how much Zeus hates Wonder Woman. He sent the basilisk to kill Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman kills the basilisk to obtain its venom, just like just like she went to Prometheus on the mountain to get his blood, because to use Prometheus's blood and the venom of the basilisk to help make the Nemesis lasso. And she even warns Hades, don't touch the Nemesis lasso. The weapons we create, there's a reason why they're dangerous and only I can use them. It's because we don't want them to be stolen, because they're made, for myself as the particular warrior. We learn so much in this issue just through the dialogue, and the dialogue doesn't overwhelm. I mean, what still overwhelms is the art, but the dialogue we get tells us so much. This is a masterfully done issue. Absolutely masterfully done issue. It made my top three, and you could maybe probably get what's positioned in that top three. It's absolutely excellent. I got a new appreciation for the series, and even a new appreciation for Hayden Sherman's art, because now, at least now, for future issues, I can imagine the art looking like this. To be quite blunt, my only complaint is that next issue, it's not going to be. Unfortunately, both issues in this story arc are not going to be drawn by Mattia. It's actually the next issue is drawn by Dustin Ewing, who's very good. But again, it's unfortunate that 2 issues in a row can't cover this particular story dealing with Hades. Sorry, you're on mute, my friend.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you can, when you look at Mattia's art, you can understand why it takes him so long. So yeah, he's not the type of artist you can put on a monthly series. But yeah, I mean, this being this is like a 2-issue arc, I was hoping that we'd get two issues from him, but not to be. Anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have Green Lantern number 21. This is from writer Jeremy Adams, art by Jack Hebert, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., letters by Dave Sharp. This one does make my top 5. Doesn't make a few, but I think you mentioned that, comes in at number 6. For my notes, I put feels connected with Green Lantern Corps in a crucial way. Feels like we're bringing back the Corps, but it also feels classic. And what I mean by that is, Hector Hammond shows up here, classic Green Lantern villain. So we get a chance to see him. So that's really interesting. And what a balance, right? Like we see here that Hal Jordan goes back to Earth. Obviously, they're dealing with at the beginning of the issue, Starbreaker and Sorrow. They confront them. We know last issue we saw Kyle Rayner and Superboy and what's the girl's name?
Odyssey. Odyssey's her name.
Odyssey. I kept wanting to say Andromeda, but I knew that wasn't that correct. But yeah, this sort of con woman, time traveling con woman, and what have you, that were able to go and get the sphere that supposedly they could use to start rebuilding the power batteries, and then Sorrow and Starbreaker were able to steal that from them, and so they're not in the best position. All of a sudden, the Green Lantern Corps, momentarily things were looking up when they had that that resource, and now it's gone. And so the classic feel, the balance I'm talking about is being able to see this Green Lantern Corps, together. They come together and they meet. They're talking things out. We get a chance to see Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner. We see the Teen Lantern. We see Simon Baz. We see Jessica Cruz. It feels like a Green Lantern Corps book in a lot of ways, and epic and big and space opera and what have you that you really enjoy. But the way that Jeremy Adams has set this up, and I'm going to see him this weekend. I'm going to have to have a chat with him. Like, how much of this was planned? Because it's so interesting the way that it's all coming together. And we talked about the continuity of the DC universe working so well right now with Star Sapphire back on Earth as a member of the Justice League, one of the most active members of the Justice League Unlimited, and Hal going, okay, we're trying to get this worked out. We're trying to figure out how are we going to defeat Starbreaker? How are we going to defeat Sorrow? Well, the fact that Sorrow is her former fiance, Nathan Broom, and so, Hal is thinking, well, who better to try to help us defeat Sorrow than to go and get Carol? Like, the guy is Sorrow because he was so, emotionally distraught when Carol, basically left him at the altar. Poor guy. And so, Hal goes back to Earth to try to recruit Carol. But, again, she's kind of learning the ropes, and she's like, yeah, this is the first time anybody's really seen me as a hero. I'm doing really good working for the, Justice League and what have you. And, I really appreciate what's going on here. I get that you need me, Hal, but I'm not sure it's the right choice. Like, and all that feels really authentic. And in the midst of all that, when Hector Hammond shows up, classic Green Lantern villain, ignore what they did to him and how he was portrayed in the Green Lantern movie. That was atrocious. But to have him show up here working for the DEO, Department of, what is it, Extra Normal, Office
Affairs,
or whatever it is.
yeah.
With Mr. Bones, and supposedly he's turned over a new leaf, and then of course at the end we find out that's not the case at all. He's trying to get level his powers back up because he's not as powerful as he used to be. Striking that balance of having the classic feel of Carol and Hal in a romantic relationship, him, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan being on Earth fighting against these Earth-based villains like Black Hand or in this case Hector Hammond, but still having the space opera aspect of it. Like, incredible job of balancing, though. That's not an easy thing to do. I mean, this isn't like an oversized issue. Jeremy's just got his regular 20 pages to work with here, but he does such a fantastic job of melding that together. And he does, again, have the benefit of working with Morgan Hampton, his co-writer, on Green Lantern Corps. So it's like we're getting the stories are melded so closely together that it's almost the same story in a way. So it's almost like we're getting 2 Green Lantern books a month, which I think we need in a DC universe when there's so many lanterns. Like I named a lot of the lanterns we saw, but we didn't see Guy Gardner, for example, in this one, or a lot of the other lanterns that we've seen lately, Kilowog and Salak and all those guys. But I think that this might be DC's best main universe book that's coming out on a monthly basis, just in terms of that balance between bringing in new concepts but making it feel classic. Again, with Hal on Earth, and we're not retreading old ground. It's familiar stuff like the Hal and Kara relationship, but it's new stories with things that we have loved from the past. This isn't the same old Hector Hammond, but it's still Hector Hammond. So for us longtime Hal Jordan Green Lantern fans, seeing a classic Green Lantern villain like Hector Hammond is cool. Because again, there's a bit of nostalgia there, but again, it's not the same old Hector Hammond. He's doing, evil stuff and trying to get his powers back and whatever. Same thing with Starbreaker. Sorrow's a new villain. The Guardians are back, Guardians of the Universe, but they're back in a different way. They're not calling the shots. So, just again, incredible balance from Jeremy with the classic and the new, and bringing in, old tropes, if you will, or old cliches from the Green Lantern Corps and the history of Green Lantern, but spinning them off in new ways with the way the Guardians of the Universe are being used and what have you. New character like Odyssey, who's so interesting and familiar. And I've talked about how much she reminds me of what's his name? I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Rasmussen. He was a character in Star Trek: The Next Generation that was played by Matt Fewer, who was kind of this thief con man who traveled through time. That's sort of what Odyssey, how I think of Odyssey, the kind of the female version of Matt Fewer. But yeah, this is just fantastic. And then on top of all of that, in this particular issue, you have Jack Hebert doing the art. His artwork is fantastic. He's got a really cool, clean, classic superhero style. Reminds me a little bit of Dan Mora in a way, where it's sort of a timeless feel, but it also a little bit reminds me of Eduardo Panseca or even Zermanico, who's the regular series artist on this book, in the level of detail and how he draws action and what have you. So I'm always a big fan whenever I see Hebert do art on a DC book. I wish he would get a regular monthly assignment. I don't know. He might not be an artist that can stay on a monthly schedule because his art is so detailed. I don't know how quickly he works, but his art is fantastic. So yeah, I was a big fan. Like I said, this definitely makes my my top 3, and it's a leading contender for my best ongoing of the year. I'll tell you that. So.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
This was excellent, and I just want to give an example to people. Not only is this for all the reasons that you stated, I won't restate all of it. It's just so well paced. He's handling. Jeremy Adams is not afraid. I mean, just dealing with the subplot alone of dealing with all these different factions trying to create their own lantern of emotional energy. That plot alone is enough, you would think, with all these players. But no, he's up for the challenge, so he throws in another one, Hector Hammond. Trying to take mind powers away from other mentally or powered villains. In this case, Mind Trap. This issue, just throwing that in. Also, a little passing reference. He has Odyssey make the comment that Odyssey makes the comment where when Superboy Connor says to her, you're pretty good at that, Odyssey. She opens up a portal. She says, you have no idea. Once I stole this flower from the Phantom Zone for some guy named Mongol. Now that was a challenge. Now, longtime readers know what that's a reference to. That's a reference to Black Mercy and one of the most famous Alan Moore stories of all time, The Man Who Had Everything. That's what I love about Jeremy Adams. He puts stuff like that in there because that's awesome. That puts a smile on my face. And a first-time reader is not going to know what that means. They're just going to breeze over that. but to longtime readers, we call those Easter eggs. Jeremy Adam, he gets it. That's the difference between having a writer, just a mediocre writer, versus a writer who knows his comics, who knows his history, and he's passionate, and he plays along very well with others, and he knows his history, and he's not afraid to put some of it in the comic book. Thank you, Jeremy Adams. Uh, I agree with all your other comments. Like I say, this was at number 6 for me. This could have been higher too. I mean, this is apples and oranges. But anyways, super great comic. Jack Herbert's art's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, definitely, I agree with you. It's definitely in the candidate for probably maybe best ongoing for DC right now. No question about it. Lots of fun. And yeah, lots of relationships developing here into relationships amongst members of the core here. I like that. Developing a relationship between Connor Kent and Odyssey, the ongoing dysfunctional relationship between Hal and Star Sapphire. And maybe we even got hints in another Green Lantern issue between John Stewart and Shira Hall. Jeremy Adams isn't afraid to not just give us interesting plots, but he's not afraid to mix the characters up as well. So good stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely be calling it out this weekend when I sit down with Jeremy and have a meal and what have you. Yeah, Rocky didn't even put Green Lantern in the top 5 this week. Make sure, so you might expect a call. Uh, but yeah, to your point about the Black Mercy reference, I'll go you one better. It's not even just that Jeremy throws that reference in there. You know,
Yeah.
stealing the flower, and we have that. We know that story. You know, if you've read
Mm.
Superman Annual 11, I think it was 1985, 1984, 1985. Could have even been 86, but it's one of
I
those
think it
3
was
years.
85. I think I
Yeah,
even have it close by here.
yeah,
But
I have a couple. I have a couple copies. It's a fantastic story.
yeah,
And again, we have that story. What we don't have is the story of Black Mercy of Odyssey going and stealing the Black Mercy flower from the Phantom Zone. And
yeah,
Jeremy references it. I 100% guarantee you,
we're gonna get
Jeremy
it.
has the story of
Yeah,
Odyssey going to the Phantom Zone and stealing that. He has that in his head and would be willing to put it out at any time that DC's willing to do it. So that's
yeah,
what's so great. When he drops these Easter eggs, he's not dropping them just to drop them. He's dropping them because he has the story already that he wants to
yeah.
tell at some point, which is, again,
Fantastic.
fantastic. So
Yeah,
just, yeah, incredibly talented guy.
yeah.
All right, up next, where does this one drop? In my
Well,
top 3, it's Black Canary, Best of the Best, number 5 from writer Tom King, Ryan Sook on art, Dave Stewart on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. Now, did you pick the last issue of Black Canary, Best of the Best, number 4? Was that your book of the week? I
I think it
want to say,
was. Yeah, I really
yeah,
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
yeah.
Despite
And this one
despite
didn't
its
even
slow
make the top 5.
presentation.
So,
Loved it.
yeah, what's
Yeah.
up? What are your thoughts on this one?
Uh, well, okay. I thought you were gonna go first, but yeah, I can go first.
Throwing you a curveball.
Yeah, honestly, uh, I've been reading this series more for the battle between Lady Shiva and Black Canary, in full knowledge that the true strong point of this series is the character work between the relationship between Dinah Lance and her mother. And in this issue, issue 5, that's where that's where this issue really shines, is in that relationship as her mother is dying in the hospital bed, and Black Canary is thinking back and looking back upon past her relationship with her mother, and about her mother always wanting her to be the best. And as she was sort of like, her mother trained her as to be obviously the best superhero that she could be. Her mother, of course, being part of the JSA. uh, I will give Tom King full props here. He's given me a renewed sense of appreciation of Black Canary, of the Justice Society. I never had that before. I never saw her as having so much agency and being as powerful or as good a martial artist as he's suggesting she was, and I kind of like that. Um, and so that character works really good. Uh, I now the nitpicking, and this is a nitpick, is I'm really loosened. Ryan Sook's art's so fantastic. My nitpick here is, some of the things, what Lady Shiva says to Black Canary to goad her and get under her skin, bringing up her dead mother. It, this is such a different Lady Shiva than the one you'd see in Batgirl, and in the Lady Shiva would. I just don't see her doing that. But frankly, whatever. Lady Shiva is portrayed like a heel here. Most of the moves here aren't martial arts moves in this issue, which I don't like. It's WCW wrestling, and Lady Shiva's played like a heel. All the moves are like from wrestling entertainment, not actual martial arts, not actual fighting moves. And so I think that for 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 me, that sort of like cheapens it a little bit. The fighting, it doesn't quite ring true to me. But again, it's it's Lady Shiva and Black Canary come into a stalemate, and I get it, and I still enjoy it because goddamn, the art's so good, and the character work is so well done that I want to buy this in hardcover. I want this to be an oversized hardcover just for the Ryan Sook's beautiful art. Um, and you know, I'm not afraid to rant about Tom King or whatever, but here I'm having a lot of fun with this series, notwithstanding some of my nitpicks, and I do call them nitpicks because this is a lot of fun. It wasn't in my, I didn't rank above the top six here, so I don't know where it would be. But this is a fun issue. This is a fun issue, and it's an absolute must for Black Canary fans. If you're diehard Lady Shiva fans, it might ruffle your feathers a bit, but it's if you're a Black Canary fan, I don't know how you could not get it. And if you're a Black Canary and Oliver Queen shipper, I don't know how you could not get it. It's that I think it's that good on the character front, notwithstanding what some issues that some people might have on the portrayal of Lady Shiva. But even that, if you think of Lady Shiva and you don't care, I know you care less about her. Think of her like a villain. Well, okay, whatever. She's the bitch mother of Cassandra Cain. Okay, well then it's not going to bother you. So, but it's like I said, I had a lot of fun with it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I've said before, Lady Shiva, she's nothing. I'm not a huge fan. Whatever. I don't dislike her. She's a villain, so I dislike some of the things that she does. There's a level of dislike, but I'm supposed to dislike her. She's a villain, right? All that being said, yeah, I did feel that the moment when she goads Black Canary did feel a little out of character as well. I mean, this isn't necessarily a Black Label book, but it does. I mean, even from the characterization, what I know of Lady Shiva, that moment did seem out of character. But you
Mm.
chalk it up to in the heat of the
Emotions
moment.
and yeah,
Yeah, the emotions are running high and whatever. But it did stand out to me, and I thought I don't know how well that landed. Um, but you're right. I mean, I've talked about it before, and you acknowledged it. The strength of this issue is and the series is the relationship between Dinah and her mother. Um, it's a very much a tough love sort of relationship and what have you, and almost a generational. You can look at it story in especially with where we are right now. And I'm not, it's always a danger to speak in generalities or whatever. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of mentality that kind of the older generation had, as opposed to the newer generation where there's seems to be a little bit less motivation or a little bit less initiative or what have you. And there's all sorts of reasons for this. It's not just generational, psychological, just the way people age is different now. Like there's a lot of reasons, and I don't want to put down one generation and hey, if you're under the age of 20, you don't have any motivation, you can't be successful and whatever. And people coming out of World War II and successful, whatever. It was a different world, a different economy, and we're comparing to apples to oranges here. But that's sort of the point that I'm getting at with the generational thing between Black Canary and her mother, right? Where her mother is like, I did this for a reason, and she, talks about losing her father, and it does explain why she, to some extent, why she is so hard on her daughter, because hey, if you're going to follow my footsteps, I want you to survive. I do everything out of love for you and what have you. So there's a lot of context. There's a lot of backstory. This 100% is a Black Canary story, not a Lady Shiva story. And so, yeah, Lady Shiva does kind of get shoehorned into playing the heel. And so I echo Rocky's sentiments. If you're a huge Lady Shiva fan, it might not necessarily be the book for you to pick up. But I agree with him again when he says, if you're a Black Canary fan, I mean, this is 100% maybe the series that sums up who Dinah is more so than any other series that I've ever read, just in
yeah,
terms of emotion and kind of the formative years and why she is what she, because I never really thought of her as one of the greatest fighters in the DCU, because I wasn't reading Birds of Prey around that time when they sort of kind of moved her over into that sphere. And if
yeah,
you listen to my interview that I did with Ryan Sook and Tom King, Tom talks about this series came out of a conversation they had at a summit when Tom, even before his first issue of Batman came out. Um, the summit, and thinking back to those times and what have you when Black Canary was considered, and this is very much a who would beat who kind of thing that comic book fans like to have those sort of debates and what have you. And this is Tom taking advantage of the position he's in to be able to tell a story like this. Hey, who would win in a fight between Black Canary and Lady Shiva? But he's elevated it, right? He's elevated it beyond just the brawl, as fun as it is, to make it a character piece on Black Canary. Now, all that being said, and as fantastic as it is and as great as that is for Black Canary fans, there's no way that this series is anywhere near successful without Ryan Sook's art. Ryan Sook is taking this to the next level. This is almost physically painful to read at times. I'm like flinching, and I'm like, oh my God, because it is just brutal. It is brutal to see the kicks and the punches and the blood and the bruises, the black eyes, the swollen lips, the broken teeth. Like, oh my God, they're pulling no punches at all. It's not for kids. I wouldn't, give this to anybody, under the age of 12 to read, because the level of violence here is just off the charts, insane. And that's, again, to show why Black Canary's mother does the things that she does, because these are the realities that Dinah Lance puts herself in by being Black Canary, right? So that Sook art, again, it's next level. Whether it is the brutality and those fight scenes that are choreographed so well and look absolutely amazing, or it is those quieter character moments between Black Canary and her mother, it shines in so many different ways, and this book is just awesome. And I would not be surprised to see Ryan Sook get nominated for best artist based on the strength of the series.
I hope he does. He deserves it.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. So, all right, up next, we'll probably cover this one relatively quickly because it's not in either of our top 5. It's Harley Quinn. We're up to issue 49, so we'll probably have a big 50th issue celebration. And the next one, I just have down. It's really fun. And Harley's very self-deprecating in the hands of writer Elliot Kalin. Mindy Lee is handling the art, Triona Farrell on colors, Lucas Catoni on letters. And Mindy Lee's art is fine. It's nothing. She definitely has a playful style, more kind of an animated or cartoony style. And this is just fun, but I know it's not the Harley that everybody's gonna love, because the stories that Elliot is telling, as fun as they are, they're not really memorable in a lot of ways. And you want to talk about continuity, nothing to do with continuity. It isn't tying in with anything. This is just kind of Harley, kind of off on her own, doing her thing. Don't need to be reading anything else. And it does seem to be for kind of a certain sort of fan. So this comes in at number 11 for me. It's okay. And they're easy reads. Unlike, I think, the last couple of runs of Harley that we had were a little bit, you had to invest yourself a little bit more to keep track of what, especially with the multiverse stuff that was going on or what have you. These are easy. It's almost like it's aimed at a little bit of a younger reader, or it's just aimed to be more escapism, where you don't have to think a lot. You can just read it and be entertained. But I know that's not for everybody. That's not the Harley everybody wants to see. So, anything to add to that, Rocky?
Well, I would caution, because when you say aimed at a younger readership, there's a lot of sexual innuendo in here.
Yeah. This isn't for kids. This isn't. Yeah.
It's not.
This
So
is like, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just that it's part of it. It wants to be funny and cater to everyone. At the same time, it's extremely sexually provocative in many ways, and that's actually, as the Pyrian fanboy in me, I do get, I do chuckle at Althea Klang, as a villain who doesn't know if she is attracted to Harley or not, but kind of is and wants to seduce Harley, and Harley is aware of it. So there's clearly a sexual attraction between these two, and yet clearly Althea is a villain. And so that's kind of interesting. I suppose if it goes, not that it's going to go anywhere, it's always going to be that something that hovers in the background between the two of them. Haven't really found Althea to be necessarily at this point to be a villain that will, maybe she's going to be an anti-hero. And also, and I plead complete ignorance on this, I'm not sure if Althea might be a trans character. I don't know if it's even a them, or as opposed to a she. I don't know, so I apologize if I missed that, but it's an interesting character, and I mean, and it's not bad. It's actually I enjoy this. I'm enjoying his writing more than the Teeny Howard run. So it is, and I'm not a big fan of the look of Harley, the particular in terms of her fashion sense. But I have to say that on the covers, on some of the variant covers, I really like her fashion sense on the variant covers. But of course, the variant covers, unfortunately, nowadays have nothing to do with the actual content anymore, or frankly, reflect the characters anymore. But that's my variant cover rant, uh, which I won't go into, I promise. But it's a skip for me.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we also have a Harley Quinn one-shot special that's out this week. Harley Quinn, Fartacular, Silent but Deadly, and that's "but" with two T's. The stinky script is by Joanne Starrer. The aromatic art and crowd-clearing cover are by Brandt and Stein. Cheese-cutting colors by Marisa Louise, and lingering letters by Lucas Gattoni. You want to talk about being aimed at younger readers? This definitely is the bathroom humor that 12 and 13-year-old boys would be cracking up about. It's Poison Ivy accidentally lets out a fart. Harley won't let it go. It causes a rift, and things go haywire from there. So, I gotta admit, had a couple moments where I chuckled or I laughed out loud. But I don't know. It's so funny because some people tell me that I have a very juvenile sense of humor, but I guess it doesn't extend to fart jokes, and this definitely is one long fart joke. Um, I mean, it's fine for what it is. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are gonna get a kick out of this, but yeah, pretty lowbrow humor for me. I didn't necessarily. I wouldn't recommend this. It comes in at number 12 for me.
Yeah,
So
I never ranked them, but this would probably be near the bottom of my list. And that's almost not even an insult at this point because this is just not a title for me, and so I have to say that up front because it's unfair of me to sort of. I feel bad saying anything critical about it because it's a fartacular joke comic. It's about
yeah,
farts,
yeah.
and it did make me chuckle, and it is what it is, and so there's an audience for it. I'm sure. It's just not my cup of tea. Uh, but all the power to people who. I mean, it's got Ivy, and if you're a Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn shipper, frankly, all these comics are for you. Frankly, because there's it's always centered upon Harley and Ivy doing something intimate at some point with a plot, with a fantastical, crazy plot, all wrapped up, and at some point, Harley and Ivy are doing the nasty and doing the deed, and so it's an eclectic mix of silliness, underageness, overageness, and sexuality that I find to be, frankly, an odd combination, but it that seems to be what DC is doing. So I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the audience is for this, but uh, I just don't know. But I guess that I'm not supposed to know because if it doesn't appeal to me, it doesn't appeal to me. So it is what it is. But if DC's ever interested, I mean, I'm a Purian fanboy. If they want Harley to go full heterosexual for a while, by all means, give me a one shot. Give me a one shot. It doesn't always have to be Poison Ivy. Have her have some fun with, I don't know, Red Tool. Bring Red Tool back. I mean, anyways, rant over.
Yeah, I mean the art is really great, and the color work is
Yeah.
fantastic as well. It's why I ranked it as I did. And it's paced relatively well. Also, I think
Yeah.
Joanne Starr definitely a talented writer. It's just, yeah, I mean, this is a book about farting. Don't get me wrong; it is a book about farting, and that's, I don't know. I guess just not for me. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, let's
Yeah.
move on. Uh, Up next, we have Green Arrow 22, which came in at number 7 for me, but easily could have been in my top 5. I'm really loving what Chris Condon, the writer, is doing, as drawn by Montos, the regular series artist. We've got colors by Adriana Lucas and letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. I sound like a broken record here. This is more of the same. But that's a good thing because ever since Chris Condon and Montos have taken over and brought Green Arrow back to his sort of street level roots, I feel like that's where the character works best. So yeah, this is more of the same, but the same has been spectacular, and that continues in this issue. So yeah, I thought it was really great, and I look forward to a long run from Chris Condon on Green Arrow. Man, it's so good, and the sensibility of Montos's art is perfect for the story they're telling. And you can go back and listen to previous episodes if you want to know more about the specific plot and story where it's made our top five. We
Yeah.
won't get into that here because this week where it didn't quite make it, but still was deserving. Anything to add, Rocky?
Well, I mean, it deals with the town. An entire town is the villain as a result of toxic chemicals, and this series focuses so much on Green Arrow being a social justice warrior. In this case, he's looking for Detective Benitez, who's been sort of kidnapped and taken by the town, and so that's really the entire issue is Green Arrow moving toward her, trying to find her and rescue her. As we get more of the background of other members of the town that suffered as a result of what happened at Horton Chemicals when Green Arrow, Oliver Queen was the CEO of that company for a brief period of time. So it's a great social justice warrior story. It's somewhat decompressed, but it hammers home the idea of social justice, which is classic Green Arrow.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, street level, but fighting for the little guy. That's very apt. All right, up next we have Peacemaker presents Vigilante Eagly double feature. So we've got a Vigilante story written by Tim Seeley with art by Mitch Gerrits, letters by Pat Brosso. Uh, we've got an Eagly story written by Rex Ogle, pencils and inks by Matteo Loli, with colors by John Kalis and lettering by Pat Brosso. James Gunn is a story consultant for both of these stories. This did not make my top five. It actually came in last at number 16. Um, Mostly because I don't really have the context for Peacemaker. I've never seen this James Gunn Suicide Squad. I've never seen this Peacemaker TV series. And the Vigilante is one of my favorite. Adrian Chase Vigilante is one of my favorite characters of all time. I absolutely love that series. And I can completely understand that this is a totally different version of Adrian Chase and a
Definitely not
different
Adrian Chase.
Vigilante completely from that. But I can't. I mean, it's not the one that I love and I have an affinity for. So I read this. I acknowledge that there's. I mean, the vigilante himself. This version of Adrian Chase is out there like Pluto with his disconnect. Guy seems to be on the spectrum in a lot of ways. Definitely has some social
Well, definitely.
interaction issues. And the Eagly story again. I just don't have the context. Now, don't get me wrong. We read the Kyle Starks Peacemaker. That was definitely the John Cena version. That one was a little leaned a little more into the humor for me, and maybe it's because we had a whole issue where here, because it's a double feature, we're not getting quite a whole issue because it's 23 pages or 22 pages, so we're getting like half an issue of each. So maybe after the second issue I'll enjoy it more. But yeah, I'm not the target audience for this, but I do acknowledge that it was entertaining, and it was great to see Cannon and Saber, classic vigilante villains from back in the day. But yeah, I'm not the target audience for this, and I love Mitch Gerrits' art. I'll always love Mitch Gerrits' art, but just based on the fact that I'm not the audience for this, something has to be ranked last. It's not a bad comic by any stretch,
Oh my
um,
God.
but yeah, just not for me. But anyway,
Yeah.
anything to add?
Well, it's definitely not last for me. I could have maybe put this in my top five. I just felt because it wasn't mainstream. I just feel, and it's in a different universe. This is in the movie verse. Just to be clear, this vigilante in Peacemaker series, he's a psychopath. He's not sociopathic. He's psychopathic, and so that's what sort of. But and he's. I mean, he's so. He's fixated. He's obsessed with Peacemaker. They're best friends. They're good friends. But Vigilante he's got a screw loose, and he's not interested in anything other than just basically killing bad guys. And he's clear. I mean, he's just over the top, and he's overly excessively violent. And there's a comedic flair to this. And obviously, you said it. If you're a fan of it, then you're a fan. If you're not, you're not. There's really no in between with this. You're either with it or you're not. And this is very much a reflection of the series. And I like how basically we got two stories here where the stories come together, or they're going to be melding together at some point. Their adventures, the vigilante and Peacemaker. The two stories are obviously at some point going to converge, and just classic humor, and of course, Eagly being the pet that Peacemaker actually takes on the plane. There's some comic book absurdities and obviously liberties being taken with it, but it's a lot of fun. Excessively grossly violent with inappropriate humor, which is exactly what people have grown to love about the Peacemaker series. And it's you can absolutely see the James Gunn influence on this series. Absolutely, it's not surprised at all that James kind of had an influence on this, and that's in a good way. So it gets a recommend from me, even though it never made my top five.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that James Gunn read that Vigilante series back in the day because that's probably where he was exposed to Peacemaker for the first time. Because Peacemaker does have a story in kind of maybe the middle third, and shows
Yeah,
up there, the Christopher Smith Peacemaker. But if I ever had a chance to talk to James Gunn, I would ask him. I wouldn't necessarily by any means wouldn't be an attack. Just be like I'm curious about why you chose to take the approach to Vigilante that you did, and maybe it's just in terms of story sensibility needed of somebody or a character for Peacemaker to play off of or whatever. But some people might be surprised if I had a chance to talk to James Gunn. That's what I would talk to, as opposed to the Superman movie that's coming out now.
yeah,
After I see the new Superman movie, I reserve the right to change my answer and say, oh, I would want to
that's
talk to
right.
him about Superman. But for me, this would be like I because I'm genuinely curious. Again, I don't hold any ill will toward the man. Like, oh, you ruined Vigilante, whatever. No, my Adrian Chase Vigilante, the one that I love, he still exists. I still have those books. I can go back and read those stories anytime I want. This is a totally different version, but I'm just curious what made him go in that direction because the Adrian Chase Vigilante that I love is such a serious and tragic character, and in a lot of ways, this Adrian Chase Vigilante is like the polar opposite of that. So I'm just curious
Very much so.
what
Yeah.
made him go in that direction. So
Yeah.
anyways, up next, this has been a really good series. Doesn't make my top five. It's actually at number 10. It's Metamorpho, the Element Man, written by Al Ewing. Steve Liebert is the artist with Lee Lowridge on colors and Farron Delgado on letters. This guy has like a late Silver Age, early Bronze Age feel. It's been very consistent, very well paced, and very fun. They've been interestingly enough, very much standalone stories where Metamorpho has a challenge he has to overcome, in each particular issue. But they do tend to lead into each other, like, and that's what helps kind of perpetuate that Bronze Age feel. At the end of last issue, last page, we see the stag skyscraper, come to life, and in this issue, it's Metamorpho having to fight that skyscraper. So it's not like they're totally disconnected, and there are the throughput storylines of the relationship between Metamorpho and Sapphire and um, Sapphire's father, Simon Stagg, and Java the caveman or whatever. Just like all the classic Metamorpho stories. So Steve Lieber's has done a fantastic job on the art in capturing the feel of kind of classic comics of that era as well. Um, but Al Ewing is just he's a little bit younger than us probably, but definitely grew up reading comics in the Bronze Age where things were more standalone. And this is I think his love letter to that era, and he does a fantastic job.
Yeah, I want to add that I like that Al Ewing has had so much fun with this series. There's a dream sequence in here where Simon Stagg is dreaming that his daughter Sapphire falls in love with Metamorpho too.
Yeah,
A different Metamorpho that he created because Simon Stagg hates Metamorpho, but but. But he's always got to reluctantly concede that Metamorpho. Well, yeah, he is kind of a hero. Yeah, he's always saving our lives. Yeah, he's a good guy and he loves my daughter. But Simon Stagg still can't help being kind of a dick. And in this issue, he creates Metamorpho 2, or in his orchestrations and machinations to try to do so, he accesses his Metamorpho file, which is really cool as a callback to the DC files, a callback to the Dage where, what do you call it, the DC Who's Who, showing the Metamorpho Element Man and the accessing those files, and he ends up accidentally giving life and creating the headquarters comes to life, hence the crazy phrase for the crazy title to the comic, the headquarters that walk like a man, and of and with all the other characters, all the machinations that Metamorpho once again is called upon to save the day, and Sapphire wants to win Metamorpho's heart back because in the previous sort of stories that were independent stories, but still part of an overarching narrative here. Sapphire sort of upset a Metamorpho, and so at some point they're going to be reunited at the end of this. I'm assuming this is a miniseries, but anyways, it's fun. It has lots of elements of humor and everything else. Again, it was another. In any other week, if DC was having a rougher week, maybe this maybe would have been closer to my top 5. But as it stands, the quality's still there. The art's fantastic. I want to give full props to the artist, uh,
Steve
uh,
Lieber.
Steve Lieber, yeah, and Lee Luridge, colorist. It really captivates that Silver Age feel, captures that Silver Age feel real well. So yeah, again, it's worthy of a pickup for people that just want entertainment. In fact, if you want humor, I would suggest pick up this series and not Harley Quinn. To be honest,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's just the
uh,
nature of the beast, right? Like when we have a week where there's like 9 titles, let's say, and we do our top 5.
yeah.
We're picking over 50% of the book. We get to have in our top 5. When it's 16, now we're talking less than a third. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast. So some of these would be, in another week, very much worthy. Um, so anyway,
Yep.
up next, this one makes Rocky's top 5, doesn't make mine. It's Justice League Unlimited, number 5, and I had it ranked at number 9 actually. But and again, it just goes back to the strength of the books this week. It's not that there's anything wrong with this. I loved it. But Mark Waid is the writer, Dan MOra on art, Tamara Bonvillain on colors, Dave Sharp on letters. Um, and I wanted to go back. So there is an iteration of the podcast back in the day where I had a little soundboard and I would play like sound effects and whatever. One of the sound effects I had was the voiceover from the cartoon Challenge of the Super Friends, where that deep baritone voice, the Legion of Doom, and I was going to play
Yeah.
that when we got to this,
Uh,
but I didn't have time to find it on my computer. Um, but the reason I was going to play that is because we do find out who Inferno is here. Now, spoiler alert, if you don't want to be spoiled, like fast forward to 30 seconds or whatever. But the villains are the Legion of Doom, which is interesting because, we know Lex Luthor is like trying to be a good guy right now. We'll talk about that a little more when we talk about Superman in a few minutes. Um, so you're like, how could it be the Legion of Doom and whatever? There's an event that's coming. There's an event that's coming, and there's a little bit of a clue to the event that's coming right on the cover where it says Ghosts of the Past, which is a little bit of a hint to how can we have the Legion of Doom as the villains. Well, the way we have that apparently is this isn't the Lex Luthor and the Grodd and whatever that you're kind of used to of the regular DCU right now. No, we're talking about uh, older versions of these characters, right? Like an older Sinestro, who's a Green Lantern currently, and an older Captain Cold, who I don't even know where he is right now. A different Joker, an old school Scarecrow, a Lex Luthor in his green and purple power armor. And the event that's coming up, I referenced it right at the top of the show, called We Are Yesterday. It's a 6-part story. It's going to be in Justice League Unlimited and Batman Superman World's Finest, which are 2 of the titles that Mark Waid writes. And it even says the time tossed terror starts in Batman Superman World's Finest number 38. So this is a Legion of Doom that, harkens back from yesterday. You can't necessarily say a specific time period because DC has that sort of sliding scale. But in my mind, kind of the mid 80s, pre-crisis Legion of Doom, or if you want to think of it as the Legion of Doom from those Challenge of the Super Friends cartoons, that's the Legion of Doom. These are time traveling villains. They're not the same version of these modern day characters that are maybe a little more sophisticated, live a little more in the gray area. Lex Luthor's been a hero, tried to be a hero or tried to at least appear as a hero at various times. No, this is the classic Legion of Doom, and I can't wait to see what Mark Waid is going to do with the classic version of these characters. So, like I said, having this at 9 is not a knock on it. It just speaks to the strength of the other titles this week. But it made your top 5, Rocky. So give us your thoughts.
yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, you had me at Doom, and because I'm a DC fan, when I think of Doom, I don't think of Doctor Doom. I could care less about Doctor Doom. I really could care less about Doctor Doom. It's the Legion of Doom for me, and and yeah, there was so much misdirection here. I mean, the series. I mean, we've been wondering the central mystery that Mark Waid has set up from the beginning of his Justice, starting at the beginning of his Justice League Unlimited run, is who is Inferno. And who is Inferno? We don't know who they are. They're mysterious. They seem to be very powerful. They almost disrupted all of the green on the planet and the oceans, et cetera, et cetera. And we know that Airwave is an agent of Inferno. Who is Inferno? Well, and right away at the beginning of this issue, where that the Justice League is trying to figure out who they might be, and they dismiss that. They actually think of Mark Waid. That's and again, Mark Waid's like Jeremy Adams. Mark Waid's not an idiot, and so he doesn't write the characters like an idiot. And he goes, well, obviously the Justice League thought about the Legion of Doom, and they thought, well, it can't be the Legion of Doom because Lex Luthor, he's doing this, Sinestro's part of the Green Lantern Corps, et cetera, et cetera. So they went through it, and they reasoned that it can't be. And so when it ends up that it is, that furthers the questions as to why. And the Justice League here is very, very intelligent. They're trying to set up to lure Inferno in. So they actually set up a conference. They have a sort of, they call it their Inferno bait, where it's a meeting of kings and presidents in Australia, which is a perfect opportunity for Inferno to strike, consisting of 20 world leaders, and there's 6 superheroes that are there that are there protecting the world leaders. New character that we don't see often: Thunderlord, Flash, Impulse, um, Green Lantern, Star Sapphire, Supergirl, and Wonder Woman. And Inferno shows up, and they end up getting sucked into the Phantom Zone, and the rest of the Justice League is trying to find them. Chaos ensues. Fantastic Dan Mora art, battles. I just love the way Dan Mora draws Wonder Woman in kick-ass action scenes. It's just incredible. And they don't know where they are at first. They don't know where they've been transported. It takes a while for them to figure out that they're in the Phantom Zone, and because they enter the Phantom Zone by a side door, they're not actually phantoms. So there's some misdirection there. And we know that if you enter the side, you can enter the Phantom Zone and not necessarily be a phantom right away, because Mark Waid established that in his Superman run in this Phantom Zone arc. We see Impulse here being utilized quite well with you know, Impulse actually figures out that one of the world leaders is actually a plant, and is actually not who not who he says he is. He's actually, it's discovered he's actually Gorilla Grodd, again member of the Legion of Doom, which is ultimately revealed at the end. But so many, I mean, again, they managed to get out of the zone. The league gets out of the zone because uh, we know from the Challengers of the Unknown arc, we know from the Question series, that the Justice League satellite has an entrance into the Phantom Zone. It's that door that we've been reading in that series, that we see in that series, that they managed to get out of the zone. So all these, again, it's nice to see that there's connections between the comic books. It reminds me how it used to be 25, 30 years ago. And I really like that connective tissue there. I really appreciate it. And again, I might have maybe a little bit of a bias here, because I see those. I see that, not that you don't or others don't, but I'm sort of longing for that. Maybe it's just the mood that I'm in presently, but I really appreciate that, and I love the fact that the Legion of Doom shows up at the end, and the fact that there might be some time shenanigans going on between worlds, because we got backstories and time display stories, or stories from the past and World's Finest by Mark Waid. And then in the present, it's so cool. And then, of course, we know we got Darkseid waiting in the wings farther down the road. And then the Absolute Universe. Such a good time to be a DC lover, man. God, good stuff.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get this classic version of Legion of Doom and check out the event that Mark Waid's gonna unfold here. All right, up next, another book that doesn't make our top 5, but it's been steadily improving. It's probably one of my favorite issues of the series so far. Book is getting good, but unfortunately, we already know it's been canceled, so there's only one issue left. So Power Girl 19, written by Leah Williams. We have art by David Baldione, colors by Romulo Fardo Jr., letters by Becca Carey. There's a little bit of a speech here by one of the characters that's sort of relevant to social media and then that younger generation that I was talking about, which I really enjoyed as well. And I know Leah Williams gets called out by a certain segment of comic fans for being woke or whatever. I don't necessarily mind it. I don't buy into the whole thing that politics have, didn't used to be in politics, have always been in comics. They've always been propaganda in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I really love the David Baldione art. I feel like Leia's finding her footing on this title, and it's too bad that it's ending. I still don't necessarily know how successful DC has been in kind of rebranding Power Girl as Paige, whatever. But it's just unfortunate that the series kind of took as long as it did to kind of get its footing, because it's getting really good and it's entertaining now, and the supporting cast is interesting. And
Yeah.
this is they need to be able to invest and keep it going a little while longer, I think, if they want this stuff to stick. But I get it that, the realities, and it's not even necessarily editorial that always makes these decisions. You have Discovery, Warner Brothers making choices and what have you. So it is what it is. I'm sure Power Girl, it won't be too long before we have a Power Girl series. Once again, every couple of years, it seems like we get one. So we'll see if next time, if she's back to being Karen Starr. Is she Paige? I can't remember what her last name is. I think it starts with an S, but I can't even think of it right now.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. But what's
Yeah.
interesting, this one ends on a bit of a cliffhanger here, where someone else is pretending to be Karen Starr. And we see Power Girl kind of crunch her phone as Lois Lane is calling her and calling her out, because she thinks that it's the Power Girl that she knows that's out there making these announcements about Star Technologies is back and blah blah blah. So who is this person, and is DC going to undo the whole idea of Power Girl being called Paige? We don't know. And this all has to be wrapped up in one issue. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that Leah Williams is up to the task, but we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Paige Stetler was the name that they changed it to. So yeah, maybe they are undoing it. I don't know, but I do wish that the series wasn't ending, because the other part of this is, I think, David Baldione. Part of when it really started clicking for me was when Baldione came on as the artist. And I think his art just kind of suits the sensibility of the type of story that Leah has been wanting to tell all this time. So I think if he had been on the series from the start, it might have been a little bit more successful. So anyway, I don't know. Anything to add, Rocky?
Yeah, the character work has really started to click for me, in the last few issues, and I actually like Siggy showing up. There's some romance between Siggy and Omen in this issue. I kind of like that. I like the fact that I liked where Leigh Williams was going. I think is I like the idea of Paige, or being her referenced by Karen Starr. They really should go back to Karen Starr. But the idea that she actually has a business called stargrays.com, which was basically an AI app that Paige is investing in, and that it is, I mean, she didn't tell Lois about it. I kind of like that. There's some tension there. She didn't tell Lois Lane about, she's investing in this app and this sort of quasi news organization. And so I kind of like that. It gives Paige her own agency, literally both. I mean that in both meanings, her own agency, but also her own business, and it also makes her a little bit more given her own independence, that she not only owns a company, but Star Tech, but she has maybe some tensions or disagreements with her own person that she's hired to help her out, and that shows up at the end of this. There's a lot of very interesting potential here, and not to mention the Void 3. These kids of the Mother Unwinder, the Mother Unwinder essentially wanting to destroy Earth in a black hole. That was the main plot. There's that hovering in the background too. So there's something here, and unfortunately, and we've said this before, there's been a number of DC titles that have just sort of been swallowed up and forgotten about because of just at this time in DC Comics, with the Absolute Swarm and everything else. Power Girl has just been, unfortunately, I think, just lost in the shuffle. But there's some, just when it's getting good, it goes away, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, this one is gone, along with Two-Face is only getting 6 issues. There's one other one, I drawn a blank on it, that got canceled as well. I can't think of what it is right now, but anyway, I'll look it up here in a second while we move on to the next book, which also doesn't make either of our top 5, but also has been improving, has not been canceled. My notes say solid but lacking payoffs, and I ranked it at number 13. It's Flash. Number 19 from Si Spurrier, art by Vasco Gregev, colors by Matt Herms, lettered by Hassan Atsman Elhau. We've talked ad nauseum about the scientific gobbledygook or whatever. At various times, Si Spurrier is bringing in that family feel that really works for Wally. Some issues he's more successful than others. But yeah, ever since the end of the first 12 issues and getting rid of that kind of cosmic horror story he was telling, this title has been better, but he's still sort of feeling it out. But I feel like it's headed in the right direction. But There are so many things, and maybe it is that scientific gobbledygook where he hasn't stuck the landing on any storyline yet, and I'm still kind of waiting for him to really stick the landing on one of these storylines, and I think that will improve the kind of the success of the title overall for me anyway. So I don't know. Anything to add?
Yeah, I read this. I read this 3 times, and this is continues to be just a painful read. It doesn't read. It doesn't flow well. I still don't understand. I'm still not clear who's actually doing the narrating in different panels. The letterer rightly colors in the narration. You know, there'll be, you can tell it's color coded, so I guess I'm supposed to know or figure out who's doing the narrating in the different panels. I don't know. I was always unclear. There's 2 flashes here. That was respectfully, I thought that wasn't a very good idea at the beginning of this arc to have 2 flashes. It never made any sense that Wally West would literally divide himself in 2 and then take away the memory of his other cloned, or his, not his clone, but he split him, somehow used his time shenanigans to make 2 of himself and then take the memory away of his one self for reasons. Just dumb. Like, I just really think it's dumb, and it doesn't work to me. Eclipso is a kind of a cool idea with surviving the attack on Darkseid and him struggling with emotions and happiness. I think there was potential there, but it's just so wonky, and it's so, I just found its pacing is so, the pacing is, the pacing is terrible. And there's a story here, and there's even a potential, there ought to be more. I should feel more emotion at the payoff of this story, because the kids, Wally is merging with himself at the end, and he realizes it's a mistake, and he tries to get his other half, apologizes to himself for dividing himself and taking the memory of the way from himself, and then they try to merge, but before they can merge, his other half is killed by, I'm assuming, by Eclipso. And so what does that mean? Is Wally not whole now? Is Wally lost half himself because half of himself was literally eaten by Eclipso? So there ought to be more emotion. This seems like I should feel some emotion reading this. His family should feel more emotion. There ought to be more. I mean, these are huge, epic time distortion, this is Eclipso, and yet I feel nothing. It's just I'm not feeling it, and it's very unfortunate, because I think that there's a story here, and the art doesn't help. It really doesn't. I don't think it's a good combination for me. It doesn't work for me, the art artistically. But again, this was near the bottom for me, and yeah, it is what it is. But I hope it hasn't been. It had some hope there for a while, but this sort of lost me in this issue. And those 2 flashes, oh my god, it was cringe. I thought it was cringe, and this hasn't worked for me. But other than that, yeah, this is the lowest of the low for me this week. But can't always hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at it as those first 12 issues, and it's gotten way better since then. I'm comparing it to itself. If I compare it to any other, era of Flash, then yeah, it falls down, and it's nice. I would be ranking it at the bottom. But I'm trying to compare apples to apples. Compared it against where we were with the first 12 issues, it has gotten better. I am curious to see what happens next, as opposed to those first 12 issues. It was like I just dreaded it. I didn't care. I could have stopped reading it at any time and been perfectly fine. But I'm invested enough in the story that Si Spurrier is unfolding here to keep reading. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out in the long run. The other title that I couldn't remember that was canceled, like the 3 that get canceled in April. So I mentioned Two-Face, Power Girl, we just talked about. The other one was Shazam. Shazam had its final issue already,
Right.
as well. So anyway, up next. So this one didn't make my top 5, but it's in Rocky's top 5. My notes say good drama. Mercy is a villain, and this is Superman. It's Superman number 24, written by Joshua Williamson. Gorgeous art by Eddie Barrows with inks by Eber Ferreira, colors by Alejandro Sanchez, letters by Ariana Mayer. I won't say too much about it other than, yeah, we find out that Mercy is a villain. She's been kind of playing this supporting character almost on the side of angels, and you've kind of been rooting for her or whatever. She's been in a relationship with Lex. Come to find out that's all a ploy. she was a villain, back from showing up in the Superman the Adventures cartoon. She reminds us she's a villain here. I really enjoyed that. I like the drama of it. And when I say this is Superman, this is in all caps, and then Superman. The reason that came to mind was because of the recent story in Action Comics with John Ridley wrote that you and I talked about.
Mhm.
And you kind of loved it for exactly the reason that I didn't. The ambiguity of Superman and
Yeah.
letting what's Major Disaster's daughter go, whatever. Here is the Superman that I know and that Joshua Williamson knows, right? Like even in the context that Lex Luthor hasn't done anything wrong per se, this time he's starting to get his memories back of when he was an evil, scheming guy, right? And Superman goes to the Metropolis Police Department and says, "Hey, he's getting his memories back of when he used to be a bad guy," and they go and arrest him. Uh, and he hasn't even necessarily done anything wrong. Now, some people might be like, "Oh, that's fascist or what, authoritarianism or whatever," but again, that's just the Superman that I know. That's how he's always been portrayed, and he talks about it. He talks, "Hey, it was tough for me to go and do that or whatever," but that's Superman. He's going to err on the side of caution, and that's not what we got in that Action Comics story. So I appreciated that here to be like, "Oh yeah, this is how the characterization of Superman." So, but maybe some people think that's old fashioned, and that's not what they sign up for. And I totally get that, and your opinion is valid. I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm just saying this is the way that I picture Superman and the choices that he would make. So, but yeah, this didn't quite make my top five. Came in at number 8. And again, that just goes to how many books were out this week, and tough choices to be made. So, anyway, give us your thoughts, Rocky, because this was in your top.
Yeah, this came in at number 4 for me, my top 5, number 4, and I just thought Josh Williamson. He's done such a good job. It's in Mercy. I could almost guess that maybe Mercy would end up being bad, but it was so well played because Mercy has been someone who she seemed to be almost like on her own hero's journey. She was a hero during Absolute Power. She's done a lot to build up Supercore, and she had and even in this issue, even until the very end at this issue. I was kind of rooting for her. I mean, it starts off, she has a relationship with Lex because as a longtime fan of Superman, one thing we know about Mercy, even from the right back to the Superman animated days, there were always Lex Luthor Mercy shippers. Right, they're there, and to see Mercy finally gets to kiss Lex Luthor, isn't this exactly what Mercy's always wanted? I mean, this is finally. I mean, this opening page where Superman and Superwoman walk in, seeing Lex and Mercy, kissing each other passionately. Wow, this is finally happening. And then Mercy, uh, you know, telling Superman she's created super drones to sell to people because and she has a legitimate business argument to make to Superman, and she wants to show Superman what her business. Proposition is that we make super drones. We can sell these to protect people around the world because even though we're super core, we still need to make money. We're still a corporation after all. That's a good point. Of course, we know Superman's going to be reluctant to sell weapons. Of course he is. But, it made sense. Mercy's a little bit of, she's got an edge to her. But she's still, a good person. But, she has a little bit of an edge to her. You expect her to maybe push the envelope a bit with Superman. But then, of course, Lex Luthor gets arrested because Superman, as he said, told the police that he's regained his memory. But Superwoman then, Lois as Superwoman goes and she discovers that because there's apparently an alien attack in another part of the world, and it ends up that Khunds, the Khund Empire, number of Khunds they're actually testing some weapons, and the weapons that they're testing happen to be weapons from Supercore, and it was weapons that were provided to them by Mercy, and of course Mercy then shows her true colors, and what I got a very bad joke to tell, and it looks like Mercy really, even though when Mercy kissed Lex, maybe she wasn't sincere about it, but if she wasn't sincere, it's because she's created her own Lex. She's created her own clone of Lex Luthor, it looks like. And I was going to say, instead, it's not a sex bot, it's a Lex bot. Bad joke, but it's a dad
Oh,
joke.
terrible joke. Wow, that was real bad.
It was a terrible joke. But anyways, so you got the Lex spot. Mercy has her Lex spot, and she can do whatever she wants with it. And she's got like some kryptonite, something in her heart that she manipulated and got from Metallo and what have you. So um, I thought this was very well done, and I think the lead up to this has been masterful by Joshua Williamson, and that's got to be something. That's not something I can always say about Joshua Williamson, but he continues to improve. And I've been enjoying his GI Joe as well over at Image, and so I really enjoyed this. I thought this was well done, and I mean Eddie Burrows' art, it's just been fantastic. It's both Eddie Burrows and Eber Ferreira as artists, and the coloring by Alejandro Sanchez. Really good stuff. I enjoyed this issue.
Yeah, I got a little bit of absolute Superman vibes, just the the tiniest bit with the duplicity of the ruling council of Krypton that we saw in Absolute Superman. In
Yeah,
a way, kind of parallels the duplicity of Mercy here, which I found to be interesting. And maybe I'm just linking those in my mind because they're both happen to be in Superman books, but really interesting because I echo your sentiment about when Mercy has like from the beginning, from the first issue when LexCorp becomes Supercorp, and Mercy has been Superman's right hand woman in a lot of ways, and he put a lot of trust in her, and to find out that she was planning this all along, yeah, really interesting from Joshua Williamson. All right, last book we're going to talk about in detail. Warning: there may be rants and arguments incoming. It's Wonder Woman number 19 from writer Tom King, Daniel Sampere on art, Tomeu Morey on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. This comes in at number 5 for me. Loved it. Not my favorite issue of the arc so far, or of the series so far, but it does, for the time being, put an end to the kind of the first big, huge story that Tom King has been telling, of the Sovereign. The reason it sneaks into my top 5, because there may have been some other titles that were close that the strength of the story might have leapfrogged this issue. The Daniel Sampere art, I got to put it in the top 5. I mean, his art, again, much like Mattio, Ewing, like I was talking about earlier on Absolute Wonder Woman, coincidentally, the other Wonder Woman book, it's the emotion in the body language, in the expressions, in the transitions from panel to panel, the strong storytelling. It's just masterful. It's masterful, and it's great to see. And as impressed as I was with Daniel Sampere from really taking notice of his art in that Justice League annual when Scott Snyder was on Justice League, which it's so interesting because when I interviewed Joshua Williamson and Scott Snyder about the DC All In special, and I mentioned that, Josh was the one that was like, yes, that was when all of us writers at DC stood up and took notice of him as well, and we started fighting over him who was going to get Daniel in their book next, because he just knocked it out of the park. As amazing as that was, he has gotten better since then. He has gotten, and I was like, this guy is a superstar in the making. I said it at the time.
really good.
And he has gotten so much better since then. Like he is just so good. Um, in terms of the story, it's interesting because in a way, the Sovereign has already been defeated, right? And he himself talks about that here, where when Wonder Woman finally confronts him in the Oval Office, he's hiding out in the White House, and he talks about, you sent your monkey to expose all my secrets, you took all my money, you defeated my honor guard or whatever, the Wonder Girls went and took out infrastructure and what have you. And so there's not really much left for him. It's kind of his last bastion. And supposedly this has been the story, and he's been the one narrating it, right? All the way back from that first Trinity special. He's been the one narrating, saying, this is the story of, how your mother defeated me. But we find out that there's a little bit of a twist. It's not that simple here, with Tom King, as things usually aren't that simple as they appear. And he says here, this could be a situation where this isn't, the story um, of how your mother defeated me, or how I surrendered to your mother, or whatever, but it's also the story of how I birthed my revenge. And so we find out that Emily, the Amazon that sort of kicked off the whole Amazons being outlawed or deported from America or whatever. She showed up in that first issue. We never really found out, why she did it or what was behind it or, what machinations or whatever. She's been sort of off the playing field. Well, we see in this issue that she gives birth, and she gives birth to a little baby girl that they named Lisa, after the god Lissa. And she says, this child too is a curse. Well, apparently in some way, shape, or form, the sovereign gets his hands on that child, and that child leads an army of some sort to Paradise Island, and actually, from what we see, kills all the Amazons except for Trinity. So, the first time we saw Trinity, she was approaching the sovereign when he was in that prison cell on whatever island it was. She goes through the gauntlet to get there along with Damien and John Ken, and sort of leaves them behind and gets there herself. And this has been the story that's been unfolding all these years, the last 2 years. But yeah, it's the story of how the sovereign birthed his revenge, because clearly he did something with Lisa or found out or whatever, and was able to defeat Wonder Woman. In fact, when Trinity goes and sees all the Amazons laid out there on the beach of Paradise Island, having fallen in battle, she finds the dagger that Wonder Woman herself gave the sovereign at one point in the story. And we'll talk about that in a second. She finds that dagger embedded in the chest of her mother. So supposedly, at this time period that Trinity is talking to the sovereign, that Trinity is the last of the Amazons. So super, super interesting. To go back to the dagger, Wonder Woman sort of summons it from the gods, it appears to me, and hands it to the sovereign, and as sort of a sign of like final defeat or surrender or supplication or whatever. She gives it to him and makes him take off his shirt and says, carve a word. And she doesn't say what word to carve, but he carves the word liar in his chest, because that's who he is. That's who he's always been, right? And it's a very topical in a lot of ways with what's going on politically in this country, and fake news and blah blah blah, whatever. But Trinity says, to the sovereign as she's talking to him, she's like, "Is that what this is really all about? The revenge you felt you were owed because of a scar on your chest?" Wonder Woman didn't force him to do it, but she kind of forced him to do it, right? Like he's no match for her physically or whatever, and the sovereign knew what she wanted. But what is so interesting is that dagger, which has on the hilt sort of the symbol of Wonder Woman when she's holding it, that then when we see it later stabbed into the chest of Diana, has kind of the family crest of the sovereign's family. So many questions to be answered or whatever. All the Amazons dead. Will Tom King have time to finish this story or whatever? Who knows, right? Like, I'm sure he's got it planned out to some extent. I'm sure he's got room to change things around or whatever, but will he stay on the title long enough? We don't know, or what have you. But one of the things that kind of gives me hope is that we know we have a Trinity series that's coming later this year. And we know, as sort of a play on words on the whole idea of Trinity as a character, Trinity being 3, that we're going to get 3 Trinities that sort of team up. Trinity at 3 different ages, that sort of, and we've already been told it's somewhat of a time travel story or what have you. Now, we've had these hints before of a possible, and I say that word, possible futures of the DC universe that are hinted at or whatever. Just because we see all the Amazons laying dead on the beach of Paradise Island doesn't mean that is the set in stone future of the DC universe, and this all has to come to pass or whatever. And maybe the out or the back door or the trap door or whatever that Tom King's built for himself is that Trinity series. So I like the potential here. It opens up a lot of questions. I know some people may not like it because how could Tom King possibly pay all this off, or how could this come to pass, or I don't want to see all the Amazons dead. How can you kill Wonder Woman or whatever? Well, Wonder Woman's not really going to die and stay dead, right? I mean, she's $1 billion intellectual property at this point, and that DC's not going to let that happen. But again, will Tom King be the one to tell that story? Maybe he leaves the book and comes back and tells it later, or maybe it does play out in the pages of the Trinity series, which I would think, this Trinity that shows up in this issue that talks to the Sovereign, the one that's been getting this narration from him and learning the story all along, is then going to take that knowledge and prevent that battle and prevent the murder of her mother, or prevent her mother from falling in battle along with the rest of the Amazons. I don't know. I'm speculating, but I like the possibilities that are out there. I love the Daniel Sampere art, and I think this just has a lot of potential. But I know it's not for everybody. So anyway, what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Well, I will say this. I've not been a fan of how this story has progressed over 19 issues, but I will. I think it's clear that what Tom King is doing is he's trying to build. He he's trying to build almost. It's almost like he's trying to tell an Arthurian tale, like a King Arthur tale. With you got this dagger that it has the crest of the Amazons and also the crest of the Sovereign. You've got a hint. The Sovereign at one point used the phrase "my dear Lisa." Is the Sovereign the father of Lisa? We know that Emily is. Why did Emily? Emily was the Amazon that attacked. That was responsible for that initial terrorist attack that opened up this Tom King's run. And so, does Emily have a relationship? Was it an intimate relationship with the Sovereign? And so maybe because Lisa is almost like she's destined to be like growing in future years to be the arch enemy of Trinity. She kills all the Amazons. I mean, all this is all well and good. This is because it worked well for the King Arthur tale. We know what the destiny of King Arthur was when King Arthur was born and what have you, and so when I think of the potential for this and the visuals, Daniel Sampere's art, you're absolutely right, nails it. Graphic art of the death of the Amazons, reference of it being called a Wonder War. Uh, Again, sounds cool. As a longtime DC fan, boom, boom, boom. I really hope it pays off. I do have cynicism. I'm not going to go on another rant about it all. I feel personally that I've had enough cynicism on this run that I really hope that it pays off. Because this is really, I got to tell you, it does look cool. It does look cool. And I even got to give some, the whole idea of there, Tom King having the Sovereign, carve, Wonder Woman told him to carve something. Her condition was that it had to be truthful that he carved on his chest, and I, because the Sovereign really is a weak and pathetic man because he had to have known Wonder Woman wouldn't harm her because that's not in Wonder Woman's nature. But he actually carved. And why did he call? He carved liar on his chest, which was interesting. Why didn't I would have thought would have carved murderer or something else. But it feels for me it felt forced that it carved liar. It didn't ring true for me that it because it. Yeah, I know Wonder Woman's truth, so he's gonna carve liar on his chest. I wouldn't have thought. I would have thought he wouldn't know what to carve. I'm sure. I don't know why he wouldn't have asked. He could have carved anything. So it's gonna. It's. I know it's. I already know it's gonna ruffle feathers because people are gonna look at that. That image of of the Sovereign looking miserable and looking like a certain particular leader of a certain particular democratic country with liar carved on his chest. Uh, this feels to me to almost be intentionally provocative in a way that maybe it serves the story and I get it, but people, um, I think people might judge this story for the wrong reasons as opposed to just enjoying the story for what it is. But like I said, I'm choosing you and I before this in full disclosure, Jason and I, those listening, Jason and I raised my voice a little bit because I ranted much more aggressively before we started this podcast. Because I can take issues with some of the aspects of this, but the reality is that I I am guilty with Wonder Woman, and I've been held to account for it. That I do have a tendency to review what I want the story to be, as opposed to review the story that Tom King's trying to tell. And if I'm trying to honor what he's trying to do here, he is trying to tell, I think, a more epic tale. My cynicism comes from my personal dislike of his Batman run, where I didn't feel there was a payoff there for whatever the reasons might have been. And I hope that he nails the landing on this because a lot's at stake here. And when you tell Daniel Sampere to draw a dead Wonder Woman and dead Amazon sprawled along a beach, uh, in glorious, violent, visually incredible fashion, you're setting up reader expectations there that you better. I hope that there's a payoff of some kind, and we'll have to wait and see what it is. But I didn't rank this very low, by the way. I ranked it sort of mid range for me, and so because the art alone is enough to put it easily. This probably would have been like maybe ninth or 10th for me out of this week. But overall, I mean, again, the great art, and I hope it pays off for the story that's teased.
Yeah, I don't know about. I don't think he looks that much like that Democratic leader that you're talking about. But I take your point, and it's not. But that sort of goes back to what I'm saying of it being relevant, right? I mean, the thing that's
Yeah,
on everybody's mind politically in this country right now is what is the truth, and the fact of
yeah,
the matter is that we have a lot of people in one of our political parties that do nothing but tell lie after lie after. It is they seem incapable of telling the truth. It's amazing how they'll lie about even the most trivial, inconsequential things. They don't know how to do anything but lie.
yeah,
So I take your point that some people may take this the wrong way, but at the same time, it's like it's sort of what's on the culturally in the zeitgeist right now of this country. Um, and as far as I sort of want to give the sovereign credit here, as weak as a guy as he is, as he's been shown to be, and Wonder Woman sort of torn down things around him along with her allies. Give the guy credit for being intelligent in a sort of conniving and manipulative way, which from the story that we've gotten, the hints of his origins or whatever, it sort of makes sense. And I think he's intelligent enough and emotionally intelligent enough that when Superman hands him the thing and says, write something, it's got to be the truth. He sort of knows exactly what she wants him to write, and he probably was fearful enough to, But you're right. I mean, he could have wrote murder or any number of things, but I think he knew what she wanted, even though she doesn't say it. She kind of said it without saying it, just in their interactions and what's come to pass. And she knows that more than anything, what the guy has done. And again, this gets into that cultural zeitgeist and talking about the kind of the real insidiousness of what's going on, politically in this country and what Wonder Woman is. And she is a symbol of truth. And the Sovereign, in a lot of ways, is her antithesis. Is sort of her Lex Luthor or her Joker in a lot of ways, in terms of if she stands for truth, this guy's the exact opposite. He's weak physically, she's strong physically.
yeah.
Uh,
And by the way,
she's
there could be an in-story explanation for how he knew what she wanted specifically, because they
Yeah,
did both have a connection to the lasso of lies. He tortured
yeah,
her with the lasso of lies, and so maybe he genuinely could get that from her thoughts at that time. So there's I mean, in my own head canon, I can justify it, but I don't know if everyone's going to be able to see that because
yeah. No, I agree 100%. Yeah, I just think he knew exactly what she wanted him, and I completely also understand the resentment that he's got to walk around with that on his chest for the rest of his life. Well, he doesn't get to walk around far; he's in the cell or whatever. But anyway, yeah, that does it for all the single issues that are coming out this week in terms of collections. There's a few out this week, everybody. We've got Nightwing Volume 7. This collects the last of the Tom King Bruno Redondo run, specifically issues 114 through 118. We also have Harley Quinn Volume 3, Clown About Town. This is collecting the last of the Tini Howard run, so issues 38 through 43. Then we've got a trade paperback for the new 52 Justice League, Book 2. Collects issue 0 and then 18 through 23, plus some issues of Justice League Dark and Justice League America and Trinity Sin specials and what have you. So big book there, 544 pages. Absolute Promethea, Volume 1 hardcover. So this collects issues 1 through 3 of Promethea from Alan Moore with gorgeous J.H. Williams art, which you're going to
fantastic
be able to
series,
see
fantastic.
in the full 11.5 by 17,
Yeah,
as all those Absolute editions are much larger than a regular comic.
yeah.
And then Batman the Golden Age Omnibus. You've got 768 pages from the early 1940s of Batman, collecting Detective Comics 57 through 74, Batman 8 through 15, World's Finest 4 through 9, And I mean, you want to talk about some legends here. It's stuff by Bill Finger, to a lesser extent, Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson. There's a artwork on the cover from the late great Darwin Cook. So some really fantastic Golden Age Batman stories, which, frankly, most of us are never going to be able to afford those issues. So
Yeah.
that's a great way, if you want to read that classic stuff, to get a chance to check it out in an affordable fashion. When it comes to um, facsimiles this week, I think there are some reprints. Yeah, we've got the limited collector's edition C59, which is Batman Strangest Cases. That's getting a reprint. Um, and I guess that's it for facsimiles. I don't see any other printings,
Yeah,
like
I think
second
that's it
printings or
too.
anything. Yeah.
By the way, I always challenge myself because I try to get all the things you talk about for the collections and facsimiles, but sometimes I miss them all week. I try to put them on this. I try to put them on the screen for those watching on YouTube, but I think I got them all this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Good job.
Sometimes I miss it.
Uh, yeah. So, like I said, big episode, a lot going on. We're going to finish up with our book of the week. I guess I'll go for. I always make you go first, Rocky. I'll
Yeah.
go first this time. Um, so for me, my top three coming in at number three was the Black Canary, Best of the Best. Absolutely love that. Ryan Sook art is really fantastic. Absolute Wonder Woman, and it was tough. It was a tough call between my one and two. Absolute Wonder Woman number six came in at number two for me, and then I had to go with Absolute Martian Manhunter at number one, just because it's so different and so out there. Denis Camp taking a big risk to do something completely different. I think he nailed it. And can't be overstated the contribution of Javier Rodriguez. I'm sure you guys have all heard the story now. I even asked him about it in that print interview that I did with him about when he went to design it, that he do the character design for it. He did it in 3D for the first time ever. And he mentioned in the interview that I did with him, yeah, he wasn't sure how to do it. So he reached out to a local artist that he knows, about the best way to do 3D modeling, since he'd never done it before. And the guy's like, just use Play-Doh if you've never done it before. And that's exactly what he did. So yeah, the first Martian Manhunter character design for the Absolute Martian Manhunter was done with Play-Doh, and Javier affectionately named him Marty. Put it together with his daughter. So that's just a fantastic story. So anyway, what makes your top pick this week?
Well, my top five, I'll start, was Batman, the Hush, Batman 158. Fourth was Superman 24. Third was Absolute Manhunter, number one. Second was Justice League Unlimited, number five. And coming in at number one was Absolute Wonder Woman, number six. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. It made me reappreciate, and it made me appreciate actually everything, even Hayden Sherman's art. It made me Mattio's art was fantastic, but it made me appreciate what Kelly Thompson was trying to do, and it and I know that's a little bit odd, but it isn't. The art matters, and it when I can when it's sort of like sometimes it's I guess maybe sometimes it's seeing a different actor play a role. Sometimes a different artist can make me see. Okay, now I'm starting to see it. I have a better appreciation for it, and I do. And yeah, just it was just great. And I have to comment overall this week. Again, it was another great week. You and I have been doing this now. I think this is going into our third or fourth year doing this, and this has been probably that consistently I've been the happiest reviewing DC like for just weeks in a row. It's just been really enjoyable, and yeah, it's been good. It's been really good.
Yeah, and I want to point out when I looked it up earlier, because I could have sworn when Matteo got announced, he got announced as the artist on 6 and 7, and then I thought maybe something got changed because you mentioned Dustin Wynn.
Hmm.
Matteo is the artist on 7 also. So
Oh,
the reason
okay.
you might be seeing Dustin listed on some sites is, and we didn't talk about it when we talked about issue 6, but there are some
Oh, he
um,
is. Okay, good.
there are some we've seen little Diana stories as backups in the regular Wonder Woman series. Well, in this
Yeah.
issue 6 of Absolute Wonder Woman, there's some one page little Absolute Diana stories. So it's that same sort of young reader type aesthetic that we got in Little Diana in the main universe. We're getting those same sort of young reader absolute stories for Little Diana, and Dustin Wynn is the artist on those. So there's going to be more of those Little Diana one-page stories in issue 7, just like there was in issue 6. But the main story in issue 7 will be by Mattio. So yeah, looking forward to one more issue of his art. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, good.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Appreciate you joining as always. Don't forget, and again, apologies that it's coming out late, but there will be the independent spotlight for last week's books coming out on Wednesday. And then later in the day on Wednesday or early Thursday will be the independent spotlight for these books. Don't forget, if you're listening to us audio only, we really appreciate it. You can find the podcast for the Comic Source on all of the podcasting platforms and apps. Just do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. Thousands and thousands of episodes of back matter you can go and check out. But if you are listening to us audio only, you can find us every week with video and see all the art and check us out on Rocky's channel on YouTube, Comic Space Boom ! And those indie spotlights that I was just talking about come out over on the Comic Source channel on YouTube. Just do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Hope to see you all at WonderCon, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.